hit record, and I can share that link with you before we leave today. I'll write it down.
Are those the only dates planned so far, or would it be offered again after that?
Yeah, if there's interest, I will offer it again. But right now, that's what I have for the summer, which was crazy. When I tried to do it, I wanted to do it earlier in the summer, and I was like, the only time I had 2 days back to back to offer it was those 2 days. So I will. Yeah, I know that's tough, the first week back to school for some people. So
yeah, it's a superintendent's conference day on the 31st, so a lot of us might have stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Yeah, I'd be interested if you offered it again, though.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So I once I have dates and stuff and start to see, it's hard for a lot of people to get out of school for 2 days. So that's why I was trying to get it in the summer. But for some of us in BOCES and that sort of thing, it's a lot easier to have 2 days to do this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So let's take a look at what we've got here. We've got, again, some people that said they just got started. Some of you have glanced at them. Some of you have noticed that it follows some of the computer science models that are already out there, which, yeah, it absolutely does. We'll talk about it. It looks like a lot of newbies, which is great. You're in the right place. And even for Julie, I'm sure we'll cover some things you might be like, hey, I hadn't thought of that. That's okay if you haven't looked at them at all. That's really all right with me. We'll get you there. So let me introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I am Lori Guion. I am the coordinator for model schools at Washington, Saratoga, Warren, Hamilton, and Essex BOCES that's located in Saratoga Springs, New York. I do have 2 different Twitter handles. One is for work, one is more my personal. Feel free to tag me or chat with me online. I'm definitely pretty active on Twitter, so I'm there. Where I got started with these standards and why I feel comfortable in sharing all of this with you is I was fortunate enough to be on the original authoring committees. They've had others since then, but I was on the original one. We met in Albany in 2019, and we really took a look at the standards that others had in other states. And we looked to how we were going to put them together. And I mean, it was an intense couple days as far as, a lot of strong minds were in that room. We had K-12 educators, we had industry leaders, we had people from higher ed that really had a lot of strong opinions on what should be included. And once we felt like we had something pretty solid, it was sent out for public opinion. They had, I don't remember, hundreds and hundreds of comments that came back. So they brought another group back to look at through each and every one of those comments. The biggest thing they saw was that there wasn't a lot at the K2. They felt like there was too big of a gap when you got to 3rd grade. All of a sudden you had to do too much. So they revamped and changed all of the grade bands and added some standards to kind of help with that scaffolding that is needed at the younger grades. So it was a big one that we saw. For what I noticed between the original draft and then the one that was put forth was that at the other end, the high school ones, they realized that many schools probably can't have designated a computer science that every student takes. Think about what classes your high schoolers take that they actually will take K or 9 through 12. English is the one I can think of, right? That's the only one that your students are going to hit. So some of these standards really needed to be able to be done in some of these regular classes in order for them to be hit, because not every student might take a computer science class. It's not required. So they really looked at that. So I found that some of the vocabulary had changed, some of the ways they described it, and then their examples were a little bit more achievable. Not to say that our students shouldn't take a computer science class in high school. I think everyone should. Unfortunately, I have one that's in high school, one that's in college now, and neither of mine did, but I really wanted them to. It just didn't work out. So, if it would have been required, it would have worked out a little bit better for them. I was also fortunate enough in the spring to work on some cybersecurity research out of Boise State. There was a bunch of us around the state that were involved in that from some different BOCES and schools, where we got to take a look at what the country looks like for cybersecurity. And we found that New York is very unique in that we have K-12 standards in cybersecurity, which was really fascinating to me. So we were able to kind of discuss that and think about what we should be doing and how we should be approaching this, not only within our own state, but how it should look countrywide. I do have an ed tech coaches cohort that meets virtually. And I'm hoping to bring it back in person, but we haven't done that yet, where we've kind of took a look at these standards and started to do some different activities with them. I'm going to show you some of those activities. We won't have time to do them today, but I'll show you some of the activities we did, and then you'll have the resources if you want to use them in your own areas. And then if you go to NYSED, we had a whole strand of the NYSED at NYSED on just the standards. They're doing it again this year. So if you are planning to go to NYSED, that's a great place for you to kind of get some in-depth for each of the standards based on people's expertise. And then we have one by us called LIT that we were able to talk and do some things there. So that's just a little bit about me, just to kind of give you some information. As we get through, we'll get to know some of you, and you can share your information. Since you kind of gave me from the beginning that it's kind of new to you, that's fine. We'll get you there. We'll give you lots of examples as we go through. All right, so let's get started. The first thing I want to do is take you through the state ed stuff, which I talked a little bit about, but I just want to show you a few of these slides. You have on your end, on the Nearpod, you're able to scroll through these, but I'm just going to touch on a few of the slides. You have access to this if you click on in the top right-hand corner of your screen, not on my screen, on the student side, there's a little black circle. If you click on that, there's a notes feature, and then you can have a copy of this whole presentation. If that doesn't work for you, just, at the end, remind me, I'll give you a student paste code so you can have access to it just to go through it as well. But I don't have it on a slide deck somewhere else, so just send it that way. It has to be a Nearpod. So you can either have it as a PDF if you hit the notes, or I can send you a Nearpod as a student paste afterwards. But I'm just going to scroll down a couple of these standards, or a couple of these slides, just to show you a couple of things. The first slide is slide 5. You can see the timeline that I kind of mentioned a little bit as far as where they were. I mentioned that early learning work group that kind of met after our standards kind of went through to kind of update everything that was happening. There was obviously a pause due to COVID, and then that early learning work group really got back together and was able to put together something that I think is a little bit easier for our K-2 teachers to kind of put into place into their classrooms. So like I said earlier, this is kind of the things that were put forth as far as revision. They needed more attention in the K-2 band. They included third grade. The third grade was included in the K-2, and it was separated out. So now it's K-2 and 3-5 instead of, it used to be K-3 and then like 5 to 8 or something along those lines. So they moved those grade bands a little bit to make it a little bit more achievable, which is great. That means your kindergarten and first grade teachers have the same standards, which is really helpful as you're going through, so that you can do that that revision, you can do that repetition, you can really get the kids to see it from more than one teacher's perspective as they're going through. Same when you get up to the other grade bands. The hardest grade band, I think, is the 4th through 6th grade band, because the 4th may be in elementary school, 5th could be in an upper elementary or middle, and then 6th grade is in a middle school. So you're going to have some cross-curricular or cross conversations between several buildings, where you may not have had to do that before, because English standards are for the grade, but now we're talking about a grade band. So that's one thing that you do have to be cognizant of as you're going forward. They mentioned something as far as making sure that there's more of a logical progression within the grades. And then originally they had examples right on the standards, and that got very confusing for people that were looking at. They felt it was a little limiting as far as they thought that's what they had to do versus just an idea. So those documents were separated out. You'll have access to all of those today, and they're on the state website as well. The way the standards are broken down is that they have 5 concept areas. So you have the Intro to Computer Science and Digital Fluency as your umbrella, and then the concepts are broken down into impacts of computing, computational thinking, networks and system design, cybersecurity, and digital literacy. Those concepts are then even more broken down into sub-concepts, and we're going to go through those today, and we're going to show some examples of those. But if you notice how many standards are in each one, the heavy load is in your computational thinking, and then behind that, or around the same as that, is the impacts of computing and digital literacy. Those are the 3 big ones, and then those networks and the cybersecurity are a little bit smaller. But what you'll notice as we go through, and I've noticed going through them, several times too, is that your cybersecurity, digital literacy, and impacts, a lot of times one lesson is going to cover multiple standards within those 3 concept areas. So even though they're different or looking at it from a different lens, the skills needed to be successful is still pretty much the same or very similar. Any questions on that? Okay, so like I said, we're really going to break these down today. We're going to look at examples for them. The examples I'm going to show you today are really K-12, ideas versus this is what you'll use K2 or this is what you use 4-6. But we're working on that. We're trying to build something where we can say, here's a K2 example and here's a 4-6, and you're going to help me a little bit with that today. The way the standards are broken down is you always have the grade band first. K1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 are now those grade bands. I think I said K2, but I meant K1. You'll always see that grade band first. In the middle, you're going to see the initials for that concept. Your concepts, again, impacts of computing, computational thinking, and so on. So they'll have initials. So it'll either be IC, CT, and so on from there. That will help you identify which part or which concept area we're talking about. And then all the way on the right is going to be the standard number. So for impacts of computing, if I slide back up here, impacts of computing has 7 standards. So it might be a K1, IC, and then standard 1. It might be a K1, IC, and then standard 7. All right, so it's not going to mention the sub concepts in the way that that standard is written. So again, you'll have the grade band, the concept, and then the standard number. Obviously, you're not going to always know the sub concepts under that, but when you go back and look at that standard, it will show you what sub concept it is. So the way it'll be built is you'll see, like you see over on the left, on the right here, this one is the grade band, the standard identifier, and then the standard. And then below the standard, they always give a clarifying statement. And this is one of those things that I think a lot of times people skip. I know I have, but sometimes it really does make the standard make a little bit more sense. So I definitely think if you're bringing this back to districts, that you spend some time reading those clarifying statements. I'm going to show you another thing that we did with my EdTech coaches groups to kind of take a look at those clarifying statements. So to kind of help us out a little bit to kind of think, what is the standard asking? And then looking at it from a K-12 perspective, what's the idea? What's the general concept? What's the theme of this standard as we're going through? This is what the standards actually look like. Again, you have the grade bands at the top and then the standard identifier below it. So it'll be like K1.CT.3 would be kindergarten, first grade, computational thinking, and then the standard 3. Here is your standard. And then below that is your clarifying statement. On the left here, what you see in this sidebar is the sub concepts. Okay, so there's a lot of the way that, I don't know if the other standards are really written this way, so this one might look a little bit different than what you're used to, but that's kind of the idea as you're breaking through. So here you see 3 and 4, you see your standards for both 3 and 4 in computational thinking on this graphic here. Where are we in the rollout? Right now, we are just finishing up that awareness building. So you guys are right on the forefront of what's next, which is capacity building. So you were aware that there were standards. Now we're going to start talking about capacity. So you're right at the beginning of all this. You're the pioneers that are ready to take this on. So for the next year or 2 years, year and a half, however you want to look at it, capacity building is your thought. That's where we're looking at that curriculum development. We're looking at getting those resources together. We're getting PD, which is what we're doing right now. In 2023, they're expecting that all credit-bearing computer science courses will be aligned to those standards, which means your K6 probably are off the hook for that year. They could start to get it into their classrooms, but it's not required yet. In September 2024 is when it should be fully embedded into your classrooms, K-12. Now, from everything, I'm on a CAP still with the state on these standards, building some of those one-pager documents and those different things like that. And the big question we've been asked, or we've asked them, and I'm sure you'll ask me at some point, is who's responsible? And they really have said that this is something that the classroom teachers should be taking on. It's not at the higher level when you get to high school. Yes, having a computer science teacher is important, but right now there isn't really pathway for elementary computer science. They're working on it. There's only one, I think it might be Manhattan College, is the only college right now that has an accredited computer science teaching program. So that's obviously something that needs to be changed as well. I haven't heard of any others. If you have, let me know. But I believe that one's the only one that has some sort of accredited program. So these standards really need to be something that our general classroom teachers need to be aware of, need to know what to do with, and need to see how to embed them in their classroom. The good thing is that these standards, for the most part, at least at the elementary level, aren't a huge heavy load when you start to think about how it can be embedded in what you're already doing. As you get into that middle school and high school, it's a little bit more directive that they kind of need to be able to do different things that will meet the standards. So I taught English for a lot of years. And in my 6th grade, I always did a nonfiction project on science because I love science and it was fun. And the kids love science. And so we did something where they had to read a nonfiction book about science. You could easily make that a computer science focus. You could easily have them look up and research inventors or inventions or the ethical side of computing just at a 6th grade level or whatever grade level they're at. So you have to think about ways that you can embed it in what you already have to do, but your topics are going to be more computer science and digital fluency focused. Biggest thing or the biggest hurdle I've seen on and you guys tell me if you agree on this one, the biggest hurdle I've seen is the vocabulary. Really what we're looking at is this new way of talking and explaining things to our students. When we're talking about computational thinking, it's a fabulous process for our students to really be able to think about how they can succeed, how they can break something down, how they can create something. Thinking of a step-by-step procedure on how to solve a math problem or how to write an essay are things we've always done with our students, but now we need to bring in that vocabulary of computer science. So perfect example, in 6th grade, I did a lot of coding with my kids because I thought it was fun. And I found a lot of correlation between the coding process and the writing process. So when my students were editing their essay, instead of me saying, all right, today we're going to edit our essays, I would say we're going to debug them. We're going to think about, is this readable for the reader? And what can we do to make it a little bit clearer? How can we make sure our message is being heard and understood? No different than if you're writing lines of code, you're debugging them to make sure that your program works. At least at 6th grade, they really bought into that. They loved that concept. So I found that to be really helpful to get kids to edit, which was nice for me. But I'm also trying to build that vocabulary so they understand those words. So when they hit the harder concepts, they have the foundation.
And you're right, Lori, it's absolutely not new. It's not a new concept. And we've basically we have been doing it. It's just knowing that vocabulary, but we have to wrap our minds around, this is not new. This has been around with Seymour Papert in the 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was very fortunate. I went to a very progressive junior high school. And it was one of those schools with no walls, which was very unusual. And we had a computer lab. We had IBMs, and I remember creating flowcharts. I remember teaching the computer to say my name over and over again on the screen, learning the basics of coding. But there was no pathway from there for me to continue on. Otherwise, I think my trajectory might have been a little bit different because I was fascinated by it in middle school. But I think those kind of experiences are what we want to give our students. And there is and we'll see it as we go through today, but there is actually one about career paths, which makes me very excited, because why not show students where the potential is, where they can go as they're going through. Awesome. All right, so those are the slides I wanted to show you in this slide deck, but this is out on the state website. I didn't pull it from anywhere that you can't have it. You can absolutely go back and take a look at some more of the things on here. But those are the things I wanted to make sure and cover with you as we're going through. Big one being the timetable and then how to read the standards. So I mentioned it before that there's these 5 strands or these 5 concept areas within the computer science and digital fluency standards. But we need to break down what each of them are. And we really are going to go through each of the each of these, in pretty good detail today. But I wanted to just take a moment and give you like a general overview of what each of them does. The first one is your impacts of computing, and that's where we're talking about the ethics, the societal impacts. We're talking about access. We're talking about career paths. That's where we're looking at it there. So it's asking those questions like, we use a new technology in the classroom. What's the impact of that technology? What does it do for a student? Or what does it do for you? It could be something as simple as screen readers, right? I've often had students that needed things read to them, and using that makes an impact on their learning. How does that impact you, and how does it impact society? So I always say the impacts of computing is kind of the large overview of everything. So why is it important that we think about it? What are the biases that are inherent in technology? What are these new emerging technologies, and what's the impact they're going to have on change? So we're really going to break that down as we go through today. The computational thinking is more than just coding. A big part of it is coding, but a lot of it is that step-by-step procedure. It's breaking things down into smaller parts, your abstraction, your decomposition, using algorithms, anything along those lines is definitely what we're talking about with computational thinking. There's a huge movement, I'm going to call it a movement, where there's educators that are trying to get a lot of our standards, or the way you teach it, the pedagogy of how you teach them, to really align with computational thinking. So your design thinking process, your UDL, backwards design, anything along those lines is really built around this computational thinking. So you probably already do a lot of it, even though a lot of times I hear from teachers that they're more nervous about computational thinking because they're not coders. I'm not a coder either. I will tell you first and foremost, yes, I did coding in my classroom, but I am not a computer science person. I'm doing something with model schools right now, learning coding, and I'm really struggling. It's not my forte. I'm trying, but it's okay to learn along with your students with the computational thinking. And in the younger grades, so your K5-ish, a lot of it is going to be things you already do, but you're going to just, again, introduce the vocabulary to make sure that they can do it. The networks and systems design is the one that this was the category I was on for that authoring committee, even though I really wanted to be with the digital literacy people, and I kept leaving the table to try to visit them. But the networks and systems design is about the Internet of Things. So we're talking about anything that has some sort of computer brain, anything that can do something, and how it's put together, how data is stored, where it's stored, how is the network put together. So I have a son who's going to a senior year of high school, and he wants to go into that networks thing. So he wants to do IT, information systems, information technology. That's what we're talking about with networks and design. Computational thinking is more what you think of when you hear computer science, but there's so much more. Computer science is that umbrella that hits these different areas. And then when we get to the cybersecurity in New York, I think we all have a leg up on it after rolling out Ed Law 2D. We understand personally identifiable information and how we need to keep ourselves secure. Now we need to make sure our students understand it, because there's a huge deficit in businesses being able to hire people that are in cybersecurity that can do it. We have a lot of businessmen and women, people that have moved into the cybersecurity world that don't have the background, because we're just not getting enough kids to explore it in college. There are more colleges that are coming out with cybersecurity as either a minor, a major, and even some master's programs, because there's such a need to fill. There's millions of jobs that are available. There's just nobody to fill them. And then when we get down to the digital literacy, that's the part that we've been talking about since we brought technology into the classroom. Your digital citizenship, how you use an app, why you would use the app. What are the safe ways to use this program? How do you act online? So that part is a lighter load, I find, for some of the others, because teachers do these naturally in the classroom. It could be simple as, I remember when we first went one-to-one with iPads in a district I was working in, I remember walking into a kindergarten class and we talked about how to hold their iPad. So we used to hug them when we walked. We gave them a hug to keep them safe. And then when we were on it, we talked about what's the right thing to do for opening an app and finding problem solving if you don't know how to sign into the app, and different things that you would do there. So you're starting with that foundation, and then you're thinking about that global connection. How could you be an impactor in your society versus a positive impactor versus a not so positive impactor? questions on those? Okay, so I'm going to throw it back at you on that in just a second. So I put the rollout in again, just in case you had questions on it, but I think we've covered that one already. So I want to talk a little bit about the why, which I've mentioned already a few times as we were going through. These I pulled right from code.org as far as information to let you know why we should be talking about it. And I love the one in the center here that says computer science is fundamental for everyone's success. Students who study computer science perform better on other subjects. So there's a big why. They excel at problem solving. That's a huge one. And are 17% more likely to attend college. That's a huge one too. We want our students to pursue whatever their dream might be when they leave our doors. If you look at the top, students who learn computer science in high school are 6 times more likely to major in it. Women are 10 times more likely to major in it if they were given the opportunity. And then Black students were more interested in computer science and more confident in their abilities than white students, but are less likely to attend schools that offer it. We need to make sure that they know that this is a career pathway for them. And at the bottom in New York, there are currently almost 21,000 open computing jobs with an average salary of over $105,000. So we know that the job market needs these students to be entering these fields. We need to be able to give them the opportunities to pursue that and to see that it's a pathway. All right, questions. You can unmute and ask. I gave you a place. I'll hide your names so no one sees who asked what questions, but I'm going to give you a moment to just kind of like take in everything I mentioned from the state. Give you about another 30 seconds to kind of let that simmer. All right, looks like we don't have any questions. All right, then we will move right along then if you're good. I don't want to stay here if you're like, got it. Oh, here's one. Okay, who is responsible for letting teachers know about these standards and what they have to, and that they have to do this? Great question. Oh, here comes some questions. Awesome. And I'll actually share this. Well, I won't share it because then you won't be able to keep writing questions. Who's responsible for letting them know? That's where we are, or where we were kind of in the awareness building. And now that we're moving into the capacity, it should be, you know, that teachers need to be aware that these standards are out there. And then it really is district focused on who's responsible. And in some of the districts I'm working with, the tech director has actually taken the lead on it. In others, it's been the principals or it's come straight from the superintendent. So that has varied in the state, but it's a really good question. You know, it really does depend on the district and how it's run, where that message is coming from. You mentioned terminology like from edit to debugging. Do you have a list of those buzzwords? Yeah, so that's a big one, the debugging one, but there is a vocabulary or a glossary, I guess they call it, from the state. I think it's a little bit, I think there could have been a lot more words they could have put in, but I will mention them as I go through. I don't have a list written down of things that I say, but I'll definitely mention them as we go through. The debugging one's a big one. What are the school motivators to encourage girls and minorities to study computer science? I don't know what their motivators are, other than, you know, you want to expose them to the opportunity. I worked with one district where they found that they weren't getting girls to continue like a project lead the way or go into their computer science classes in high school. Somewhere in middle school, they just didn't want to anymore. So we did a whole study, and I have actually the link to it in here. We did a whole, like, you know, look at women in STEM and expose them to students that are, expose them to career people that look like them and learn from them and explore the different pathways. So I think we want to try to get the students to be more motivated. If I would assume that most girls are like mine, that if their friends doing it, they're more likely to do it. Yeah, somebody put in the chat, actually just to me, Girls Who Code is a program to motivate girls. That's a fabulous one. There's some other programs that are trying to do that. I even know, I was talking with somebody about esports, and they said that they're really trying to get more girls involved there by having games that maybe appeal to them a little bit more than some of the others. So I think we have to think about it. There was one woman, oh gosh, I wish I remember who she was. I was watching, I should have written it down. She actually created girls clubs in her own school, and she had them name themselves. And one group was called the Tinker Fairies. And I thought that was so cute. Or the Tinker Bells. They were called the Tinker, but like Tinker as in like makerspace kind of thing. And I thought that was fabulous. So I think it's just finding ways, or finding those interests within the students to try to get them to be motivated. I think a lot of it has to be with, and I think all of you will agree with this, they need to see teachers that are interested in it as well. I think that's a big part of it, that they're excited about it, and the students may as well. How are teachers in most districts being made aware of the standards and the timeline? So again, that really falls on who your communicators are within your districts. I know through my BOCES, every time we have a meeting with all the superintendents, I was giving them updates on what these standards are. And I was hoping they were sharing that out with districts. I can't guarantee that. I have it on a newsletter that I send out to districts too, which teachers can sign up for. So I don't know that I know the answer to that every district, but I do think that that does come from admin to some extent. Anyone else want to add to that or have a thought on any of those questions that we just went over? Actually, you didn't ask the big question. Who's responsible for the standards? Maybe I've covered that already enough. But that's usually the big one I get when I start with the questions. Like, you're asking a third grade teacher now to handle an ELA exam, a math exam, prepping them to get them ready for their fourth grade science exam. And then third grade, they're learning multiplication, and you might still teach cursive. And then now you're adding on top of this that they have to do computer science. And that's a huge load for teachers to take on more. But I think when I've done these little mini presentations, whether it's 1 hour workshop or a full day one with teachers, the biggest thing I get is I can do this because it already fits into what I'm already doing. It's changing the vocabulary or maybe shifting the focus a little bit, but they're not a huge heavy load. As you get into middle school and high school, the load definitely gets a little larger. Somebody said, I'm a K-5 technology teacher in my district and I have to facilitate a group of teachers tomorrow. So yeah, use anything that I said and ask. I will be happy to share anything that I have that will help you out. But that's perfect. Tech teachers, I was an integration specialist for years. I think that's a great place for this message to come from. I think that would be great for you to kind of talk about that. All right, so let's look at those sub-concepts within each of these strands. So we're going to start with impacts of computing and really break it down, and then we'll go through the rest of the day going through all of these. You're going to start to see a rhythm in how we work today. So the first one we're going to talk about, because it's at the top, is impacts of computing. Quite honestly, if I was going to start somewhere, so Stephanie, for your training tomorrow, I always start at the bottom and work my way up. I find that digital use and that digital literacy piece is an easier one for people to grasp, and impacts of computing is like, whoa. All right, so actually doing it backwards can be very helpful to get teachers feel a little less nervous about it. I'm going in order today from the top because you chose to be here to do the intro. We're going to do it in the order that the state put it together. I don't think it was ever supposed to be a stacked list. It just, that's kind of the way it worked out. So I'm going to give you an activity first. This is Nearpod's new drag and drop. I gave you a technology timeline, and I want you to drag where you think or when they first came to be. So 1 will be it's been around the longest, and then 9 would be it's the newest of the social media platforms I gave you there.
Can you repeat the directions?
Yes. So for 1, you want to put the oldest, what's been around the longest. And and up to 9, you want to put the newest of the icons I gave you.
Thank you.
Sure.
How do I access my, how do I do this?
Are you in the Nearpod?
I don't think so.
Okay, let me get you in. I just put the link in the chat. You're going to open that link up and then you're going to
Okay.
join and you can have access to it. That way you have access to all of the resources as we go through.
Thank you.
Sure.
And you said 9 is the newest one, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Give you another 15, 20 seconds to do that. Looks like most of you are done. It's interesting. The middle part, most of you are about the same, but the end has changed a little bit, which is funny with where you are. So I'm going to show you, if you haven't submitted, go ahead and hit submit. I'm going to show you the actual order. I had to look it up. I didn't know this off the top of my head, but I'm going to show you the actual order of the technology timeline here as we go through this next slide here. But you started with the World Wide Web. That came first. I actually, my dad was one of those that loved new technology. So we actually had a computer. It was an old Prodigy computer that had the thing before World Wide Web that was called, it was called Prodigy, was the name of the was the program. It was a what was it, Commodore 64, I guess, the name of the computer.
So I am embarrassed to say I wasn't sure what that icon was, and I thought it was like some new app. I just didn't know. Oh, so thank you. I see somebody else shaking their head too, and I was too embarrassed to ask.
Oh, I should have said World Wide Web. Well,
So
good to know. That's a good feedback.
So that's why I said AOL first.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, thank you for agreeing with me.
My bad. All right, I will change that icon for the next time I do it. AOL is next. I remember being on AOL, you know, early on. It was fun, but remember that's when we all had dial-up and you had the weird noises that were happening. And then it was Google came around, you know, back in the late 90s. And then LinkedIn, which I honestly was very late to the game on LinkedIn because I didn't get on that till way later, but that's been around for quite some time. And then we move up into Facebook, YouTube, and then Twitter, Instagram, and then Snapchat is the most recent. We know that that's where our kids lie, is in the Instagram, Snapchat type of world. So that tends to be where their mindsets are. For adults, we tend to be more in that Twitter, Facebook kind of group. And then YouTube, even though it's smack dab in the middle of those two, YouTube is where our kids are spending a lot of time too. That's where they like to learn, right? That's where they go to find everything. Yeah, they do live on TikTok, and I didn't even think to add that on. I probably should add a 10 and put TikTok on there as well. They do live on TikTok. My daughter, yeah, side note, my daughter put on a TikTok and she was like, Mom, I'm TikTok famous. She had like 300,000 people like a video. was like, okay, like, what does this mean for you? She's like, nothing. I just am TikTok famous, and something silly about something she did about her job. But it was cute. But the idea is, what has been the impact? We're talking about impacts of computing. What has been the impact or the trajectory? What has changed since the internet started back in that level 1 that we've gotten to the Snapchat? How has our life changed? How our children function? How has that changed? Biggest things we've seen, there's a whole video on the Gen Z, which is a group of kids we have in our school right now, that they have an 8-second attention span. Most adults have like a 20-minute, actually I think it's down to 7, they said now. So our attention spans are shifting because of all of these distractions. And it's not, I mean, for as much as they say they have an 8-second attention span, really what they have is an 8-second filter. If after 8 seconds, what you're saying isn't interesting to them, they've moved on. They tend to be connected to up to as many as 5 different devices at the same time. Versus when we started using the internet, you would go to a website and then you'd walk away for a while because you knew it took a little while to load before you'd come back and actually be able to do something. So when we're talking about impacts of computing, this is what we're talking about: how things have changed, what's happening, and what impact that has made on how we function and what we do. The sub-concepts within impacts of computing are broken down into 4 areas. And I literally copied and pasted this right from the state ed website. So this information, I won't read it to you, just know that it's out there. But I'll talk about each of the areas. Society is what we're talking about, the culture of what has changed, how things have changed based on the laws and based on the technologies that are available. Ethics is a big one that we're starting to see a lot of buzz around because it hasn't been something that was thought about as new technologies were coming through. But it really is something that's booming right now. I'm part of a group, tech, it's called, I think it's called Tech is Human. It's from the tech ethicist, as he calls himself. He's written a couple of books on it. It's fascinating to be a part of that group. I just kind of lurk. I don't involve myself with it, but it's businesses that are starting to realize that they need to think about what they're building and what they're designing and the impact it could have. So it's a growing field. So if your students love to think about these kind of things, here's a career that they could certainly, really be at the forefront of. The next one down is accessibility. And here we're looking at, product design. So you hear stories of students that build, prosthetic arms. There was one that was going around Facebook recently of a class of students who built a baby stroller that hooks to a wheelchair to help one of their teachers' husbands because he had to walk. He was in a wheelchair, but he wanted to take his newborn baby on walks. So and Julie put in the chat, especially with artificial intelligence. That's a huge part of the ethics part as we're going through it, and what accessibility can do. And we'll hit on some of that as we go through. And then the big happy one that makes me I'm so happy, there's career paths. What can kids do with this? Why is it important? Kids always ask that. Why do I need to know this? And they might say, I don't have a plan to go into computer science, but computer science is in 90-some-odd% of all jobs. I don't remember the actual number, but even the skills that are needed, businesses are saying everybody needs to have a foundation in computer science. It's necessary now. So even if you don't plan on doing it, you might need it. I remember saying that to my my geometry teacher in middle school. I was like, when am I ever going to need geometry? And then I worked in insurance for a bunch of years before I went into education, and I used geometry every day. I was going into people's houses and measuring how much paint they needed and how much molding they needed or how much roofing based on the square footage and figuring out the area and perimeter and that sort of thing. So who knows what you're going to end up needing. So opening them up and exposing them to different career paths is really important. Now, the image you see on the right on your screen is an old one. It's been around a really long time, but I still feel like it's a message that needs to be heard. I was working with a group of STEM teachers recently, and I asked them to show me their what do you call it? their syllabus for the year. And they were like, we're gonna make a Prezi, we're going to create a video, like all of the things were what they were going to do with technology. I'm like, no, what do you want them to do? Like, and it took a really long time for them to get it. We want them to find ways to have conversations. We want them to think about how they can make a positive impact, how they can raise awareness. They might build a presentation, but what's their presentation on? What's the learning objective you have here? And that's what we're talking about. So if their learning objective is to teach others how to use a certain app or a program or whatever, you want them to think about that from this concept. What's the impact that this technology is going to have? Technology is a tool. We don't teach, well, we do a little bit. In kindergarten, you teach them how to hold a pencil, but then you move on, right? By third grade, you're teaching them how to write essays, or by second or first grade, they're writing essays with that pencil. Maybe they're learning to draw with that pencil. The pencil is a tool. Just replace the word pencil with computer, with robot, with whatever. That's a tool, and people have to think about their learning outcomes differently. This impacts the computing, I'm hoping, will help with that, because I think that they'll have to think of it from a different lens, but the lens hasn't shifted yet. So, and I'm guilty of this too. I remember saying, all right, we're going to do some things with robots, but the learning objective was still to understand the concepts. It's just we're going to use robots to do it, and that's what you have to think about that. All right. Nothing wrong with producing videos or writing or doing a podcast, but the content and your learning objective is not for them to make a podcast. The learning objective is whatever it is they're doing around that podcast. Questions on the sub-concepts before we dig in? All right, so this, if you don't know Dr. Kay Metz, do I have her book? No, I have it at home. She has written 2 books with ISTE. They're both fabulous. I highly recommend them. The second one is, and I have a picture of it on another slide. So it's Ethics in a Digital World. Her first one was on digital citizenship. And I've been fortunate enough to see her speak a few times on different things. And she fascinates me, so I follow her. But she wrote this, and I'll read it out loud to you. It says, while DigCit encompasses all sorts of topics like information and media literacy, as well as internet safety, I believe we have an additional obligation. We need thoughtful, empathetic digital citizens who can wrestle with the important ethical questions at the intersection of technology and humanity. So here we spend so much time on making sure our kids can use the tool or get online or get to their LMS, whatever it is, but we have to think about what's the impact of that and how does that impact things around them. So if you don't follow her on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, I highly recommend you follow her. Her information is really, really good. All right, so here what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what we call a placemat. And this one's already filled in. All right, and this is one that my ed tech coaches has filled in. If you do the train the trainer, we fill them in. We take the time to do that. But what I want to do is I want to give you some time to look at it. This is not from the state. This is something that a educator in my area put together and we've been using. And the idea is that the standards are at the top. And then what we did is we pulled out all the nouns and verbs by grade band. And then what we did is, if you look down in the box that says in our own words, the anchor standard, the old statement is because we looked at it from the, we did it and then they redid the standard. So we just said, do the old statement still fit? If they did, we left it. That's why you see those words there. But the statement should still fit K-12. So what I want you to do is, it's 8:50. I'm gonna give about 5 minutes. Well, I'll give you 10. That way you can take your first break. Let's do that. We'll come back at 9. I'm gonna give you time to look through this document and think about these standards, the nouns, the verbs, and even those clarifying statements, these anchor standard ideas. And then we're going to discuss it when you come back. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes. All right. If you want to shut off your camera and take a step and walk away, you're welcome to do that. And then we'll come back then. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Lori, my view is not exactly the same as yours. It seems like my tech interpreted a little different, a lot different.
Okay.
Just to let you know.
So let me open it.
Are we intended to write on top of this in any way or no? I'm not sure.
You do not need to write. You just need to view it.
That's it. Okay, so then I'll just look at yours.
Okay, that works. Well, you're not gonna be able to scroll then. Can you scroll on yours?
Still no. I can just a bit, but it's showing me kind of the nuts and bolts. I'm not. Let me refresh.
Okay, Try that and see if it lets you. I'm gonna see if I can send it to you too.
Got it. Perfect.
Oh, good.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Lori,
Yes.
I know we're still reading, and I'm gonna have to jump on a call, but looking at ethics and, I'm sorry, trying to find the page. Ethics and K1, not applicable. Is this a stretch to say not sharing someone else's password or not is an ethic at that age?
I guess that you can start to introduce it as a concept, but I don't want them to confuse it with being a good digital citizen. You know what I mean? Like you don't want them to think ethics means, being kind online. I guess that you want to think about it from what's the impact on others based on what I'm doing, which again could be, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a hard
see,
one.
now that you said that, right? Because think
Yeah.
about that for our young ones.
Yeah.
It's just a thought. I'm
Yeah, I think, yes, I don't think using the word ethics will make sense to a young one yet, but starting to think about the
No,
concepts of it.
but
might
just
be.
explaining the concept. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could work.
And
It's
hi,
true.
Bill, I am Groot.
I love it. As you're coming back, I'm going to put in the chat the All Tech is Human website. So when we're talking about tech ethics, he's really taking the lead on this. It's interesting. It's definitely from a business perspective over a teaching perspective. So keep that in mind as you're looking through it, but it's neat to see how people around the world are thinking about ethics in the business world. So like I said, I lurk on it. I don't so much, engage with it, but it's interesting to see what the world is thinking. So we'll leave it at that. And then while we're coming back, I was going to grab the 2-day train the trainer one.
Lori, would you only recommend going to that if you can do both days?
No, what we did this first hour is completely the same there. But when we get to this part where we're breaking down the standards, that's when we kind of dive in. So if you can come for some of it, great. If you can come for all of it, even better. I totally get we're busy people. So
Okay, thanks.
come for what you can. Either way, you'll get all the resources.
Awesome, thank you.
If you come, sure. All right, I just put the link in there to sign up for that one. All right, so let's turn it back to you guys. Where are you on the looking at that document, looking at the nouns and the verbs and all of that kind of thing? What are your thoughts? So while you're thinking, one of the big observations that I get often is, and when we do this, when I do the train the trainer, we really break it down into the Bloom's taxonomy. Where does it fall? And that is actually something I've done with teachers, with groups of teachers, and they really enjoy that, going back to like our training at the beginning to think about Bloom's and those steps, because you can't do these standards in a traditional classroom as well as you can in some of those non-traditional settings. You really have to think about the higher order part of Bloom's, where they're creating, they're evaluating, they're thinking about it in a much broader sense versus here's the information, give it back to me on a test, we're moving on. And I hate to say that as traditional, but that basic kind of understanding, right? So as we're getting farther up, not to say when you put those verbs across that some of them don't fall in each of the Bloom's areas, it's just you'll start to see a heavier load in the higher order thinking skills versus the lower ones that are also important in the classroom, but maybe not for these standards. Yeah, Kristen, so
Lori,
that's one thing you wrote down.
I got the exact same thing when I saw the verbs. I was like, oh, it's still just Bloom's, but it's more like technology is just the tool which to achieve those goals. So, it's definitely got that. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Yep. Kristen, so that's the one thing you wrote down too.
Yeah, that was what I noticed, but it was a lot to take in. So I didn't end up writing anything else down. I just kept scrolling and looking and going, all right, one thing at a time.
Yep. Well, that's why, like I said, when we go into, like, if you do the train the trainer, that's why we actually take the time to make you pull out the nouns and the verbs and then look where they fall on Bloom's. It's kind of an important process, but this is an intro class versus a deep dive. So here, I just wanted to show you what the work can look like. And you have a copy of the document. You can delete out the nouns and verbs and make other people use it, whatever you'd like to do with this document, or build your own placemat. The other parts of that placemat, so when we're looking at, let me share my screen, because then we can be looking at the same thing. Do this. There we go. Okay. So when we're looking at this placemat, and I know somebody said they joined on the later side, so let me put the link in the chat while I'm thinking of it too. There. So then you're getting all the resources there too. Okay. So we did the nouns, the verbs, and the in your own words. The examples part we found was the hardest part to kind of do, so we skipped over it. And with my groups, we've filled out the prior skills and the anticipated pitfalls. We've actually done that work. I didn't share it with you because that's something you can certainly do because it's different. What we found was it was different per districts. A lot of them were concerned, especially in that 4th through 6th. Who's responsible for those? Should it be a 4th grade teacher, a 5th grade teacher, 6th grade teacher? How do you communicate between those different grade levels? So when you're thinking about building or doing some sort of placemat activity, these are really where you're going to get a lot of those questions if you're going through and doing these with different groups, because they're going to say, well, who's responsible for making sure that they know how to discuss how tasks are accomplished with technology? Who's going to have that conversation? At the younger grades, a lot of times teachers will say, hey, I think it falls on the computer teacher or the library media specialist. 99% of these standards can be done in the library, but how often do your kids go to the library? So you have to think about that. Yes, they're your fabulous resource. Use them, ask them questions, ask for resources, ask them to co-teach with you. Your library media specialist is so super important when we're looking at these standards, especially this one, the impacts, because this has been something that they've been doing. But this is not something you can just say the library is going to take care of. It needs to also happen in our classrooms, because we all know that when students do like a research paper in their English class, they will always cite their sources. They do it in social studies unless the teacher tells them to. They're not citing their sources, right? So they have to know that it matters no matter which class they're in. So you want to make sure that you do that part. The examples, I'm going to show you some ideas today, and that's what we're really building that capacity for the next year. That's my goal, is to get the examples part filled in for ideas. The state gave us some great ones that are pretty generic, which is great, and definitely tie into our other grade levels. But we know that maybe there's something already happening in classrooms that we want to capture and say, here's another great idea. Any other questions, thoughts, comments as I move past this placemat? You're going to see one of these for every one of the strands or concept areas. I always call them strands, but concept areas. So Sonia wrote, I'm the library media specialist, PK 3 through 12. And I like to think that I lighten the load for classroom teachers and an excuse to co-teach. Yeah, absolutely. You guys are the heart of the library to me is the heart of the school, right? And everything else that beats around it. And so absolutely any chance you can work with your library media specialist. It's so super important. Yeah. And you guys are the experts on a lot of this. Like when I presented this or a shortened version of this to librarians throughout the state. And a lot of them are like, we've got this. They don't look at this as a new load for them. They're like, it already ties into your library standards, but it's exactly the idea. Let's get back into the classrooms. Let's do some different things with our teachers to help them understand these standards as well. All right, so when we're talking about impacts of technology, the first area is society. And what I wanted to kind of show you is just take a look at what society means. So this paragraph you see here is right from the state. I didn't write it, but I've added this graphic in. I gave you the link that I got it from. But we are in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. Our first one was in the 1700s with steam locomotives. In the 1800s, we had electricity. 1900s was computing, and now we are connected. We're 5G. We're thinking about the Internet of Things. We have automated everything. I'm not even just going to say cars anymore. It's everything. So that's where we're thinking about how much things have changed and what's the impact on society. That's the biggest one we hear when we get to that digital use. They're like, well, how is this different from impacts to computing? And a lot of this is, how does it impact everyone? All right, not you as an individual. Obviously, you as an individual also impacted, but you have to think about it from that perspective. I threw this slide in because I was working with a group of teachers and they didn't know what Internet of Things was. So I put a definition on here that it talks about these things that have sensors, software, technology. So if I asked you, and I'm not going to, but if I asked you to list all the things in your home that have a brain, you might not be able to think about it. But if I say, all right, tell me anything that has a sensor that uses some sort of technology, things that you plug in, beyond like a lamp, because that's your electricity one. But is your lamp a smart lamp, or is your light bulb a smart light bulb? Do you have an Alexa, a Google Home, any of those kind of things? Do you wear an Apple Watch, or do you have a car that parks itself? My car, I don't have a car that parks itself, but if I cross the line, it beeps at me. These are all these parts of things. It has a sensor that knows that I've kind of moved or drifted a little bit and wants to bring me back. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the Internet of Things. It says with more than 7 billion connected Internet of Things devices today, experts are expecting this number to grow to 10 billion by 2020. So we're already there, and 22 billion by 2025. So I thought that was important to kind of give you that definition, because like I said, vocabulary tends to be one of the hardest parts of all of this. When we get to computational thinking, we're gonna play a game with the vocabulary to see how you feel with the vocabulary. But when we're talking about that fourth industrial revolution, we are talking about AI, which I know people mentioned already, 3D printing, biotech, robotics, autonomous vehicles, nanotechnology, quantum computing. All of that is what we're dealing with right now. I was taking my son on a college tour out in Rochester, New York, at RIT. And we were on the tour, and a professor stopped our tour to tell us that there's a new major coming, and there's a biotechnology that it was related to facial recognition. He said it's a field that's growing, and we need students that are interested in it. And he went on about how, if you like biology and you like technology, this is a perfect convergence of that. And that's really the word that we're hearing a lot, is convergence. And it's another vocabulary word that might be good to talk to your students. So I'll give you an example. We all have a cell phone, right? Here's mine. I have an iPhone. My iPhone can do a lot of different things, right? It can take photos. I can send text messages. I can email. I can look up information. I can play a game. I can also make a phone call. It's a convergence of technology, and that's what's happening now. Is we used to have a phone, right? If you had the one in the kitchen with the long cord that you wanted to use, you always had the phone. You had a camera, you had a video camera, you had a board game, right? So you had all of these things separate, and now they're all coming together. That's what we're dealing with right now with this fourth industrial revolution, is we have all of these technologies and they're converging. It's fascinating. I love all of this, but that's where we are when we're talking about society. But we have to think about what's the impact of that. That's where we come into these different standards. Also, we need to think about the job market. So this is a great, I don't know where this graphic came from. I haven't been able to find that out. Sony shared it with me, and I thought it was fabulous. So I threw it in here. So I'm sorry, I don't know where it's from. But there's white collar jobs, which we know are the jobs that you have to have a college degree of some sort, usually have a higher pay salary, something along those lines. Our blue collar jobs are our labor jobs. A formal education is not always required. They might have to learn a trade or get a certification. It's a vocational school, something along those lines. They're usually like on the job training, lower no skill jobs, often paid on that hourly basis. Okay. And then what we have now are new collar jobs. So these are your kids that are coming out of high school that already have a job, that are already building something, designing something. They're technical, they're hands-on. They may have to go to college for it, or they've figured it out on their own, but their starting wage tends to be higher than those that just have a high school diploma, more those above those blue collar. I'll give you a perfect example. We had, at my BOCES, we were looking to get drones, and we decided to purchase these little Tello drones to use with classes. Super fun, cute little drones. Indoor use, not anything we had to worry about aviation laws and all that kind of stuff. And this gentleman came to talk to us to teach us how to use the drones and do a little training. And I think he was in his early 20s at the time. And he said when he was in high school, he found he was fascinated with drones, so he got his aviation pilot license to fly the drones. And by the time he graduated high school, he was already making over $1 million a year, being hired by real estate agents and insurance companies to fly the drone over houses or in and around damage to look for leaks using sensors and being able to analyze data. That's a new collar job. He was able to build that and design that. The gentleman who made GimKit, that was a high school project that he fell in love with. And by the time he graduated high school, he had to hire a business manager because he didn't know what to do with the money that was coming in. So yeah, esports is another fabulous one to think about. Now there's degrees in it. My son actually, there's a couple schools that have esports management as a minor, and he's thinking about doing that. So when you're thinking about the way the trajectory is, it's not always you got to go to college anymore. It's there's different pathways, and we need to open up students to those opportunities and allow them to explore their passions. So that's what we're talking about, the current job market here. So let's dive into the standards. And if you come to the Train the Trainer, I show you some other soft skill, hard skill kind of things, but just to kind of keep things moving along, we're going to jump into the standards. This is a different view than what you're going to see on those actual, the square ones I showed you at the beginning. I pulled these right from the spreadsheet, which I can't get to work on the website right now. I've reached out to them. They swear it works in Chrome, but not in other things, but I can't get it to work in Chrome. But this, I like this progression because for me, it's K-12 up and, from top down. So I like to look at it from this view. So what you see is the grade bands on the left. You'll see the progression, which is impacts of computing. 1 is the one we're showing you now. The standard identifier, so you can see all parts of it. You'll see the standard, the clarifying statement, the concept, and the sub-concept. All of that is listed on here. So as we're going through, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the standard, give you a second to read them. Then I'm going to show you an example of what that standard could look like in action. And we're going to kind of do this a lot as the day goes on. So with this one, pick a grade band. I know a lot of you are BOCES members, so grade bands aren't as important as like kindergarten teacher says, I'm only going to look at kindergarten. But pick one and just read through across your standard. And I'm going to stick to kindergarten right now and just give you an example. So from the state ed, an example of this standard would be students could discuss differences between playing a board game and a video game, or mailing a letter versus sending a text message. Compare and contrast activities. Do we do those at that level? Yes. So here we're doing the simple compare and contrast we always do, but now we're going to take it into a technology view, right? Something along those lines. To give you a higher example, here is on your left here, you're going to see where I have a quote from Elon Musk, but maybe you can read it, maybe you can't, depends on if you can read the language that it's in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the student view for a moment so I can grab that, grab something called Immersive Reader. You probably are aware of it, but Immersive Reader will read the screen for you. It will also translate. So now I have this little book icon. You see it on your screen, you can click on it too. And when I click on that book, you'll see that I have the information here written. It gets rid of all of the visual noise around it. And when I click play,
Impact on Society. Existe la idea tonta de que el fracaso no es una
all right, so I can hear it. And then what I can do is I can click on this book icon and I can choose to translate this into English. So I'm going to go down to English, United States English, the whole document, and now I'm going to have it read to me.
Impacts on Society. There is a silly idea that failure is not an option at NASA. Failure is an option here. If things don't fail, you're not innovating enough. Elon Musk.
So the thought here and what you can do with your students is you can have them have those discussions. What's the impact of having something to be able to be translated for you? What is the impact of you as a student, and how does it impact society? I had a student one year, we had iPads, and the student hated it was like a tactile thing. He hated the tapping on the iPad for typing. He could play it out in different things where he wasn't typing consistently, but typing on that keyboard just bugged him. And it just like to the point where he didn't want to do the work. And he was a kid that always did his work. So I asked, what can I do to help? And his thing was, can I talk it out? And yes, there's voice typing, right? So I put him on his Google Doc. I had him read his essay into the iPad, and then all he had to do was edit his essay. So those kind of things have an impact on what our students can do in the classroom. You know, there's always a student in first, second grade that hates holding a pencil. What can you do? Well, they still need to be able to hold a pencil. You don't want that to go away, but you can think about how they can do different things. The image you see on your right is one of my favorites. So this is from 1907. This was actually ran in a newspaper in 1907. And you see them looking at the telegraph and not looking at each other. So imagine if you overlay this where you take out the telegraph and you put an iPhone in that spot. Has it come true? Right, so it's an interesting thought to go through, and it says under, if you can't read it because it might be small on your screen, it says these two figures are not communicating with each other. The lady is receiving an amatory message and the gentleman some racing results. So that's it, right? So I think that these kind of things, we often use DBQs, or we use visual things in our classroom and have conversations about it. At the higher end, this could be completely an English conversation. You can do this in a history class. Yeah, it looks very familiar. Absolutely. I mean, even the turn of the neck, right? Because we all do that when we look at our phones. That's why we all have the neck issues, right? Because we're looking down at it. So really interesting ways you can kind of do that. I'm going to show you a couple more. And I'm going to give you the access to the links in a minute, but the one on the left shows that steam engine, right? And when trains started going fast, there was this belief that that it caused madness, that people were going insane because they were going fast. And they would prove it by showing bad things that happen on trains. You know, people would run around without their clothes on, or stab somebody, or shoot somebody, you know, horrible things, but they were blaming it on the fact that the trains were going fast. So they felt the impact of these trains was causing an issue within their society, right or wrong, right? So so we know that we can go fast and it doesn't cause madness, but back then we didn't. But you can talk about that as far as new technologies. What's the impact? The other one is GPS type of activities. I used to take my kids up to a camp in Lake George every year for a week. We would go up to Camp Gingercook, and I did geocaching with them. When I started, we used the little compasses. And then by the time we stopped doing it, we were using like GPS machines, and then eventually iPads. But you can talk about that transition as we're going through. So here's the resources. So here's that article if you want to, you know, copy and paste it into another link. And if you have this, you're going to get a copy of the Nearpod if you took the notes there. But here's that that article just to give you that information. And here's a great website from the US government about GPS. So these are all activities you could do with your students that you can build into whatever you're doing in the classroom, but you can tie that in by talking about what's the impact of having this? What does it do for us? Why is this important? And you can have those conversations. All right, I'm going to give you another second to look at this one for 2. You pick your area, and then we'll talk about that.
Lori?
Yes.
Was this document taken from the New York State website?
Yes. Yeah, it's a spreadsheet that's on there.
it looks familiar. My colleague and I are starting to introduce the standards to the teachers at our district. And I work with the K-5 group, and she works with the middle school, high school. And it looks like she reworked this document and she added another column to it. And I think at the top it said course and grade level. And so what we've started to do is, as we have teachers look at each of the standards, the teachers' grade level, they'll mark it as, oh, we teach this in our grade level. So you know how you were talking before about who's responsible for teaching what. We're in the very early stages because I don't think everyone understands the standards yet, but we're starting to make decisions on who is going to be responsible, where is it going to be taught. So a 7th grade math teacher might teach one standard, or it's in one of their lessons, and they're going to mark it down. And then, and when we're working with so I work with a 5th grade, and there's that band where it goes to 6th grade also. So we'll be able to see who's teaching what. So I think it's a good start anyway, using this document.
Yeah, I like the idea of it being right here to be able to say who's responsible. So it's one document that your teachers are looking at. I like that. Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, and actually, I think it's great that the state put out this spreadsheet. Like I said, I love the way it's organized, but I also love that it's on a spreadsheet that you can then bring it into your, whether you use Excel or Google Sheets or whatever, but you're able to bring it in and add those columns in as you're doing that. I have started to see teachers take this and create a timeline with it of what standard goes when. So, you may not do it in a linear fashion. You go from 1 to 2, but depending on your grade level. So that's a great idea, Stephanie. Thank you. All right, so on the second one, this is still in the IC2, which is society. And that one where we're talking about that, discussing that technology to identify and explain classroom rules and so on. And then let me show you some of the ideas with this one. So this one I found, if you don't know Beluga is, I did a workshop with him yesterday, actually, which was pretty cool, with Evan Schwartz, who runs this program. And Beluga is semi-free, let's call it a freemium. There's a lot of content that's free for you to use on it without you having to worry about paying for anything. Obviously, if you want your kids to sign into it, it's not EdLaw 2D compliant yet. I know he's in the works to try to get it done, but certainly something you can do, whole group, to share with your students at this point. And then you can also set it up where you don't give any PII. You can set up your students just with like a nickname and a password. And I think you have to put in their birth date, but you can put in, a generic birth date to kind of get around that. So you don't have to worry about signing them in if you want to use this with your students. But this is a interesting, and I'm not going to make you watch it, but it's an interesting 7-minute video from a 17-year-old boy. That's who this guy is here. And he says that it's easier to buy a hamburger than it is to buy a home. And what he describes is, he said, I can go on Uber Eats and I type in the word hamburger and it's going to show me all of these different places. It instantly gives me my results and I can order right away. Then he compares it to, what if I want a house that has a chandelier in their living room? And he's like, I can't do that on real estate sites. There's no search engine. There's no artificial intelligence being used to find the images of chandeliers to be able to send me photos with that. And he said, why is that? If I'm going to spend $1 million on a home, why am I getting a very basic search that I can say, here's what I want. I want a house that costs $1 million. He's like, it makes no sense to me that I can put in more parameters to buy a hamburger than I can to buy a home. And so he's saying we need to fix that through artificial intelligence. Really interesting concept to think about the impact of this on everything that we're doing as we're going through. So again, this probably middle school, high school, you can get away with using the video like this. At the younger grades, you probably want to try something a little bit different. There was this image that came through from iSearchGlobal.com about the 10 technologies we had to learn in 2020. And in the Train the Trainer, I actually have you take a moment and kind of circle the ones you actually know what they are, and then we talk about them a little bit. But here we have the Internet of Things. I know it's a little blurry on your screen. Blockchain technology, extended reality, predictive and prescriptive analytics. And you can talk about these different technologies and what they actually mean. What are the career opportunities? What are the drawbacks of having this exist? So something along those lines. All right, so I'm going to throw it back at you, give you a second to kind of think. What is something new you learned this year? So new app, new website, new tool, something new that you learned. Share that on the page. My words are not working right now. Awesome. I'm gonna put your names on for this one. Christina learned TikTok this year. I still don't understand TikTok. ISTE standards, yes, that's a great one. Yeah, I don't know that one at all. Thought exchange. Yeah, Nearpod features, Final Cut Pro, Google Classroom and TikTok, Seesaw, all fabulous ones. Definitely. So we all learn, we're all constantly learning something new. Now here, I'm going to turn the question on you a little bit. And I'm not going to change the screen. And you don't have to write anything down. You can if you want to. Cami, me video, awesome ones. What is the impact this has on you? What is the impact of knowing this? What does it know on you? And you can add it in if you want, or just think about it. All right, now I want you to think about what is the impact you learning this tool has on your students. I love Cami. I just did Cami Connect. That was fun. And then finally, I want you to think about what's the impact of society on the new technology that you learned. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, learning TikTok or Seesaw, or even Nearpod, they can quickly respond and give and explain things. Beluga, I'm going to go back to it again because I listened to it yesterday. Beluga has a new platform or area on their platform that's coming out in the fall. I have no idea if it's going to be a charge to it, but you know, like on Edpuzzle or on Nearpod, you can embed questions and then students can either answer it, short answer, or multiple choice. Well, Beluga's taking it a step further. What they're doing is they're going to have these pop-ups that come up on the video that you can choose to pause the video and answer and do different things, or you can just go on. But every time that pop-up comes up, the teacher can choose which icons to put for audio, video, short answer, multiple choice, just making a comment, and then students can see each other's comments within their classroom that others have said. So it becomes this social part as they're going through it and answering these questions. And there's a huge impact on how that changes how kids do video, because that's the biggest complaint I've been hearing from students lately is I don't want to watch another video and answer questions. No different than giving them a worksheet with the, with questions that they have to answer on their reading. So they're starting to want something new. And here's a great way to kind of refresh it again. Give them options on how they respond to it. No different than your choice boards and that sort of thing. Yeah, thinking out of the box. Students have various ways to express themselves. More choice, yeah. Impact on society is that teachers who are forced to use technology remote can still get away with worksheets instead of meaningful learning assignments. Yeah, that is also true. But you can also take Cami beyond that, right? Cami could be everywhere. If you're going to go back to SAMR, if we're going to go back to that foundational one we all learned, right? Cami could be substitution, put that worksheet in. It could be augmentation, where all of a sudden the students can kind of work together. It could be modification, where now the students can add their voice to it. And it could be redefinition, that all of a sudden it could be collaborative, that it could be video and verbal feedback back and forth. They can share it with a global audience and get feedback on different things. So it could be any level as you're going through, depending on how you use it. Awesome. All right. Let's talk about ethics. This is the book I was telling you that Kristen Mattson did. And this is again, it's from ISTE, but and I've read about half of it. I haven't finished it, unfortunately. I'm still working through it. It's fascinating to me. What she did is she took real life court cases, real life issues that are happening in the world of technology, and she gives you real world applications to the classroom. So, Facebook has had some issues with privacy, and then she talks about that and how you can relate it to things you're doing in the classroom. It's really fascinating the way she describes it. It's definitely for educators. So I highly recommend it. And then the paragraph you see on the left is right from the state. There are 3 standards in the ethics one that we're going to go to. So the first one is going to be the IC.3. And this is from that tech ethicist that I sent you that link to. David Ryan Polgar is his name, and he wrote, an engineer looks for a solution to a problem. A tech ethicist looks for the problems in that solution. So those kids that really love to push your buttons, right? That always ask the why or those kind of things. This is a perfect world for them because they can ask those why questions. What's wrong with this? How is this put together? All right, so here's a poll question. I'll hide your names again. Have you watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix? All right, most of you, so far, most of you have not. It is super fascinating. I'll put it there first again. It's a short watch. I don't know, it's a little over an hour maybe, but it really makes you think about how technology is controlling you. So, and yeah, Julie wrote scared. For example, Netflix. Every time you go on Netflix, it always gives you options on what you will watch next. And I don't remember the percentage. It's a very high percentage of what people watch on Netflix is because artificial intelligence has told them you will like this. And it's pretty accurate. You know, if you really love action adventure, it's going to show you more action adventure. If you like sci-fi, it's going to show you more sci-fi. That's normal. But it actually makes the choices for you. And we have to think about that. Is that okay? We have to have those conversations with our students. My mother and her husband just came to visit us, and my stepfather was using my Hulu account to watch different things. So now the algorithm's wrong right now because he watches very different things than I watch. So it keeps offering programs that I have absolutely no interest in watching. So I can see it at work because now it's showing things that he likes versus what I like. So it's an interesting concept. If you haven't watched it, I gave you the link up in the top corner. You'll see that you have access to see it on Netflix. But and I know a lot of teachers want to use this in their classroom, but remember there are copyright restrictions with you watching video streaming, especially in your classroom. Check with your library media specialist on what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do before you actually show it. But it's a fabulous one. Yeah, Julie says, I hate it when my husband logs into my account. Yeah.
And I can totally tell the difference. And when I really started looking at AI, and I would say, were you on my account? Because I'm like, I don't watch all these kung fu movies.
It has to make its own profile, Julia.
He does have his own profile.
And it still affects yours?
No, he's not logging in. He's not going to.
He just doesn't use it.
Yes. So mine is like all weird hodgepodgey.
Yeah. And you're like, why are you on mine?
Yeah,
So
just go over there. I made it for you.
That's right. So this is right from Kristen Mattson again, where she talks about the social dilemma a little bit. And this is a slide right from one of her presentations. So I'm linking it back to her. So I don't want to break any copyright, but I thought this was very well put together. But she says, this is kind of the big key takeaways from the social dilemma. For-profit companies are not designing products with our best interest at heart, right? They're there to make money. Silicon Valley has been largely unregulated and unchecked, and tech developers did not anticipate the consequences we're living in today. These are, like, if you teach high school, these are great questions to have kids think about, right? These are big ideas that they'll be fascinated with. I was helping out a high school. It was a 12th grade honors English class, and the teacher was doing this really interesting project on. They watched a story about when somebody's actually dead. They were watching like a story of a student or a child that was brain dead, but you know, the heart was still beating. Are they really dead? That kind of thing. And it kind of went off in all these other tangents. And you know, these are honors kids. They were asked a lot of really good questions. So she let them pick something that they were interested in and do research on it. And this one particular group that I was working with on putting together a presentation did it on who gets the best healthcare in our world. And so they used Fluency, which is one of my favorite graphic ones because it has a lot of images for students to use. And what they did is they created a graphic with a bunch of different people, you know, from different walks of life, and really made sure that they were very representative in what they put. And then they recorded themselves taking away different people that don't get the best healthcare until it got down to the one person who does get the best healthcare. So they were able to make this very impactful, you know, mini clip that showcased what they were trying to explain in their essay that they wrote about the topic. And that's really where this kind of comes down to. That's the impact of healthcare in our world, but you can combine that, or you can change that to be the impact of the technology and do the same types of things. All right, so here's the next question I have for you. It says poll one, you can pick more than one answer. I've hidden your names. Which of the following are initiatives in your school? It doesn't have to be this year. It could have been the last couple years. Yeah, I know some of you are BOCES. So things that maybe you've been involved in or you've heard, the buzzwords or whatever, you can do it that way. I know, or pick one district that you happen to work with a lot. Like I have one district, I'm there twice a week, so I would think of it from their perspective. I am happy that some of you said data privacy, that's an initiative. That's really good. But one-to-one devices is by far the winner. Interactive displays are right there. The LMSs, whether you use Google Classroom or whatever, Canvas, any of those. Maker spaces, new tech tools. Awesome. All right. Very cool. A couple of you said emerging technologies. All right, so I'm going to move on from this, but and kind of explain why I wanted to ask you these questions. But one-to-one devices, data privacy, interactive displays, LMS, new tech tools, those are your top ones as we go through. All right, here actually I'll share the pie chart with you for just a quick second so you can see it yourself. But one-to-one devices definitely came up as like the biggie. All right. So where do we put our focus? So when we're talking about the impact of society or impact of computing, when we talk about, and what you just told me, our focuses tend to be on STEM initiatives, coding, robotics, maker spaces, design thinking, computational thinking, rapid adoption of new tools. But the question when we're talking about the impact is what's the impact of having this STEM, the coding, the robotics, the computational thinking? What is the impact? What's the importance of having it? And that's really where we should be asking ourselves, is it's okay to have these new things, but what's the impact of having these new things? And how are they impacting humans in society? Now, when if we were in our Train the Trainer, I showed the video, but this is from 2017, so a few years ago, but it was a gentleman of color who put his hand under the soap dispenser. It wouldn't give him soap. The only way he can get soap is if he took a paper towel that was a white paper towel and put it under. And he talks about, here's the problem with diversity in tech. This is the impact of society on having some of these automated things. And we have to think about that and how that impacts people. And he's giggling and laughing through it, but you know, this is really absolutely something that people need to be aware of and we need to consider as we're talking about the impact on society. All right, so now let's look at this standard when we're talking about that point 3. And this is identifying computing technologies, discussing ethical relationships with the real world computing technologies. We're really getting into the ethics of everything. So with computing. So we talked about society, now we're moving into ethics. So here is a fabulous article called "Should Alexa Read Our Moods?" And I'll give you a quick overview of it. But what this one does is they're working on technology that if you ask Alexa with a certain tone in your voice, it's going to make suggestions based on your tone. So if you sound sad, it's going to suggest you go get ice cream. And is this okay? All right, so that's a big part of it. For the younger grades, it could be you have them invent something and then talk about how that would make their life or the life of others easier. You know, this could be a real good makerspace type of activity where you give them a bunch of like pipe cleaners and cardboard and have them design something really hands-on. There's also a fabulous podcast, again, probably high school. It's probably the only place you can use this, but you can certainly pull parts of it for your younger grades. It's called Should This Exist? There's a really good one on a side note on SATs that I really enjoyed. I listened to that one, but this one is about Halo, which is a headset that you wear that helps you learn faster. And they always interview the inventor, the co-founder, the CEO, somewhere along there, and they talk about their product and all the benefits it has. And then they tear it apart and they talk about the other side of it, all of the things we should be thinking about with technology. How much information are we giving away? What's the impact on, you know, where's the data being stored on that information that we're giving away? Who's going to use that? Who has access to it? What if there's a data breach and that information gets out? So all of these different things are what you want to be sure to talk about with your students. All right, so here's my next question for you. What technology exists that you question? Or if you can't think of one, what questions should we be asking about technology? Yeah, artificial intelligence, absolutely something we need to be asking about. Yeah, there's so much. What's the impact of that? It's a toughie, huh? Yeah. Your son uses Halo. Your son could use that. Oh, I could use that. I don't always make my words make sense. Sometimes I try to say one word and a different one comes out. Yeah, Alexa, that's a big one. I had this debate with a woman. She said she keeps hers in her bedroom, and I'm like, do you really want Alexa in your bedroom? Or no, it was her bathroom. That's what it was. She's like, I like to listen to music in the morning, and I was like, should that be allowed in there? What are they listening to? And yeah, Alexa creeps you out. Yeah, I love my Alexa for my shopping lists. I love it for when I'm doing a recipe and I can put different things on it. There's definitely some things that are nice about it. It does a slideshow of pictures of my kids that I love. But you have to think about that. Yeah, social media. What is the impact? This is the first generation really that has lived with social media all the way through. And what's the impact going to be as they grow up? Kids whose parents post pictures of them every day, every temper tantrum, every silly thing they've ever done, every food they've ever eaten is posted on Facebook. What's that going to be like when they enter the job world? Yeah, those are questions we should be asking. Yeah, I was fortunate enough that my kids were born when Facebook came out, or right around when I started using it at least. And I remember even from a young age, I would show a picture to my daughter and be like, you okay with me posting this one? I want to show Nana, because that was who we were, I was connected to my mother, so I wanted to be able to show her the pictures. And it became something we always did to build that contract, that trust between the two. Yeah, Photoshop software. Yeah, we don't even know if pictures we see on the internet are real anymore, right? So that's a huge one. That Photoshop sounded great, so you can take out somebody in your background you don't want in a wedding shot, but now our wedding photo, but now you're being able to take out different things or put them in different places and make it look real. Good ones there. All right, K4, K4, impacts of computing 4. We're still in ethics, but here we're talking about the personal versus societal trade-offs. Personal private spaces versus your digital spaces. What you share, with your people that you're close to versus the people, out in the World Wide Web. So a simple example of this, and I'm not going to make you do this activity, but what are you okay with sharing in the world? Create your own billboard. A lot of teachers do this as like a first day of school activity, where they have the kids create an all about me. What are they willing to share? And is that information something they should be sharing? Like dogs' names. How many of you use the name of your dog in your passwords? I don't, so I can tell you my dog's name is Paisley. So you can do those kind of things, but think about the fact that some of this information we're gathering can then become PII, right? Because they're using it in a password. So think about what you should be sharing and have these conversations with your students. I was in a 9th grade class. I was doing digital citizenship, and I asked the students why they take so many selfies of themselves, and they don't feel they take any. And I'm like, but you're on Snapchat and you send 15, 20 Snapchats a day. And they're like, yeah, because we're connecting with our friends. They don't expect that photo to be saved and used in some other way, but sometimes that happens, and you have to think about that impact of it. I'm not going to make you make the billboards just for the sake of time, but just as an example of an activity. Moving on to 5, I'll give you a second to read that. So you get into a kindergarten class and you ask the kids, what streaming services they use, and then you might have to explain what they are, but the kids are going to be able to say Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, YouTube, all of these different things that are streaming services. And then you say, who shares your password? That's where we're talking about it here. Like, you share a password. Julie said her and her husband have the same, Netflix account, right? So you're sharing a password with your spouse. That's great. But who is it okay to share it with and who is it not? And that's a big part of this standard. But it also is talking a lot about the biases that could happen within this standard as well. Questions on that? Because that one's a toughie. All right, so again, I'm taking you out to Beluga, but this one is an artificial intelligence one. We've hit on that a lot that when we're talking about impacts. And what's neat about this Beluga one, I'm going to open it up real quick here, is they have these different ones like about AI, robots are taking over the earth, is anyone home? And then they have pattern recognition, which gets into the computational thinking. But what's neat is they ask the big questions, and this is for your 12 to 15 or 14 to 18. So these are for your older kids, but you can talk about how is artificial intelligence impacting what we do on a regular basis, and how is it impacting our world. So you can really have those conversations with something like this. You can show them it's one of my favorite videos, the Boston Dynamics robots, which are the most advanced robots in the world. And you can show them dancing, and you can show them the CBS interview that it took them 8 months to get their robots to dance like that, and why it was important for them to learn how to do it, and what's the impact of that. So anything along those lines, artificial intelligence is definitely something we should be discussing in our classrooms. Then the next strand is accessibility. You only get one. You get one little standard on this one, but it's going to have to be a pretty big, impactful one. But again, the accessibility can really tie into the society and the ethics part of it. So the one standard, and this is from, they've been updating their the standards with some of the vocabulary. So I pulled this from a newer spreadsheet. That's why the colors are different. But here we're looking at that standard number 6. And from here, we're starting to think about how access matters, or what access can do to meet the needs of all of our people. I'll give you a second to read that. Big one when you're talking about this with your younger kids, voice recognition. All right, you've got a first grader who can't say their L's and R's or can't pronounce something. Will the computer understand it? There's if you ever watch Big Bang Theory, there was Kripke was a character on there that had a speech issue, and he couldn't get Siri to work. And he's like, Siri, I want a restaurant, is how he said it. And Siri's like, I don't know what that is. And he says, Siri, you're stupid, like, and it becomes this big laugh. But really, there's an impact to that. He wasn't able to use Siri because of the way he spoke. What is the impact of that? What about people with accents? Is it going to pick it up? And granted, that was when Siri first came out, and that has changed and updated and gotten better. But you can talk about that and how that has an impact on accessibility for people. Just to kind of bring it to a totally different view, here is a virtual reality field trip of a place in Croatia. Now, you can have a conversation with your young kids on, or even your older kids, who can get down there? Who are people that can't? My mother's a cancer survivor. She had lung cancer. There's no way she could walk back up. She can get down, but there's no way she'd ever get back up. So what's the impact of that? But then relate it back to computers and how that makes a difference. So you can have those conversations with your students, but you can take it into something fun like virtual reality. And then the final one in here, and then we'll take our little next break to give you guys a stretch break again, is career paths. And like I said, I love that they included this in. There's only one standard again, so make it impactful as you're going through. The icon you see on there, or the picture you see on there, are some of the big new career paths that are happening. So these are the emerging careers that are happening. And AI, we knew was going to be on there. But even healthcare is having a massive overhaul in e-medicine and all of that. And then wearable integrations. There's a great, code.org has a great video. I don't think I have it included in here. I might. That they showed these two women that are integrating technology into their clothing. And so you can talk about that wearable integration. How is it going to be embedded in what we're wearing? And harnessing big data is a big one, blockchain technology, which I'm not 100% sure if I could describe that to somebody if somebody asked me to give an elevator speech, but it has to do with privacy and security. That's about all I can say. All right, so you can have that kind of activity. The one standard, again, identifying your jobs, the diversity of the roles, and then how computer science is integrated into pretty much every field. When we went one-to-one with iPads, and I'm sure you've had some of this pushback too, I definitely had parents who didn't want me using technology in the classroom. They didn't feel it needed to have a place. And my argument was always that when you enter the workforce, you can't, there are very few jobs that don't use technology. One of the biggest growing fields, and it wasn't on that other slide, but I've been reading up on it, is farming. The AI and machine, like they have, instead of like a Roomba for your house, they have lawnmowers and tractors that run on machine learning and do those same types of things. Drones are being used a ton to take a look at their crops. And they said that the average farmer, I think, is 65 years old. So that there's a need for younger people to enter the farming world. Obviously, farming is important. And then women, it's even less people that go into it. So you can start to have these conversations about these opportunities that there are, but computer science does play a part in any kind of career that they're thinking about. This project is one of my favorites. It's the 1,000 STEM Women project through Duane University. And I'm going to open it up because I want to go down to the actual Flipgrid for it. Now, it's all these 90-second videos.
Hi, my name is...
let me get into it here. Okay, so there was a lot of clicks to get in. I probably should have just put this link in for you, but I wanted you to have the information from the beginning of it. But there's information here on what they ask women to record, and then take a look at, they have 105, so they're not at 1,000 by any chance yet, but they're starting to build it. Look at the faces of these women, and all of these are fascinating stories about different types of things in the science world. So you can see all of the different parts that are here. You're starting to see languages, that are spoken, and they talk about what they do. My favorite, and I'm going to scroll down to her if I can get to her. Here she is Vanessa, and I'm going to play this one for you. And I love this one because this one really gets kids excited.
Hello, my name is Dr. Vanessa Perotta, and I'm a marine biologist and science communicator from Sydney, Australia. And I study whales, just like this. But specifically, I study whale snot, which is that visible plume of spray rising into the air as a whale takes a breath. We can collect this to learn more about whale health from looking at the bacteria in their lungs. But specifically, we can do this via the use of drones, just like this, where we can fly the drone through the densest part of the whale's snot to be able to collect that bacteria. It's important we collect whale snot to learn more about whale health, and this can act as a potential monitoring tool to look for changes in whale health over time. But there's still way more to learn, so I hope that you have many questions as I do, and we can learn a lot more together.
So, I mean, and not all of them are as engaging as that one. That one just happens to be. Some of them are even more engaging as you go through. I haven't watched them all yet, but it's a great way to introduce students to different fields. So spend some time. I did this as a mini hyperdoc. I set it up on a Google slide. I made them watch this one woman, and then I asked them to find 3 others of anyone. So they could pick any way they wanted and just look at the different careers, you know, and then pick whoever it is they want to watch. The kids loved it. And when they were done, the idea was what careers are interesting to you? And then we tried to bring it back to what different things they could take in high school, because we were trying to get them to take some of the computer science classes to learn more, to be able to do these different careers. So kids loved it. They thought it was so cool. The fact that she says snot, you know, they love that. But it's a great way to introduce careers. There's others. Skype a Scientist is fabulous. National Geographic, I just did their educator program, their certified educator program, and they have fabulous resources and videos. The idea is you're bringing the world into your classroom and saying, here are some things you can do, you know, that maybe they never thought of. I mean, did you know there are soil scientists? Maybe there's kids who love to play with dirt. Maybe there's kids that love bugs and they can learn from other ones, you know, but they can see, like a design engineer. I mean, there's just so many different paths, and all of these have something to do with computer science or science in general. So you can have those conversations. So, I mean, I love these. They're just so great. So, actually, I'll put this link right in the chat for you, since you don't have to click through if you want to save it and take a look, share it with your districts, that sort of thing afterwards. All right, so here's where we're going to take our next break. So it is 10 o'clock. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes this time. What I want you to do, and I gave you the link to the state ed standards on this Padlet. I want you to add in your thoughts, like things that you think you could do that cover impacts of computing. You don't have to, if you can, put the standard that you think it relates to. But if you have just general ideas based on what I showed you, put them on here, and I'll explain why at the end of the day why I'm collecting these. But the idea is go ahead and start to think about how these could look in your districts. I know a lot of you are BOCES, so maybe you've been out of the classroom quite some time, and it's hard to think about how you might do it. But think about what you used to do when you were in the classroom that you can relate this to. But we're going to come back at 10:15. I'm going to take a quick break too, get some more water. You know, get up, stretch your legs a little bit, take some time to think about this, and then we'll talk about it when we come back. Stop share, pause. Let me hit the record button so I don't forget. Share my screen again. Back over. All right, so we have one person who was able to add something, and that's okay. I know this is just the beginning of being able to think about it, and so it's all right. But somebody wrote, during artificial intelligence PD, discussing how we need to prepare students for jobs that have not yet been created. Yeah, and that's absolutely something that when you're thinking about you know, the why of why we're teaching students these things, or why we're trying to make sure that they understand how technology works. We have to think about the fact that many of the jobs these students are going to go into weren't invented yet. You know, I never thought I'd be like teaching technology or coding. Like that didn't ever occur to me when I was a kid. So I totally get it from your perspective there. Another person said, I had students form groups and read interactive books on internet safety. Then they taught the class what they learned. We had a lot of good discussions about safety. After each presentation, we did kind of a red light, green light activity where they said, is it safe too? Fabulous. There's so many good books. Again, go back to your library media specialist. If you know Stephanie Affinito, she does Affinito Lit is the name of her Twitter handle. She has a really good Padlet, and I'll see if I can get my hands on it on the next break. Let me write it down. On internet books. And books. I'm gonna look for it later, but it's a great list of just books that are out. And I don't know if she's been updating it. She built it a few years ago, but they're still applicable books of just really good picture books. I love to show, and I show it in the Train the Trainer, the video, if you give a mouse an iPhone. It's a fabulous one to show kids about the importance of finding that balance between being on your device and not on your device. So definitely take a look at that. Any questions about impacts of computing before we move on to computational thinking? I forgot I had that slide in when I asked. I'm just going to keep moving on from it. All right, so computational thinking is our next concept area. It is broken down into 4 concept strands that you see on your screen: modeling and simulation, data analysis and visualization, abstraction and decomposition, algorithms, and programming, which I know I have a typo on that page, and I knew it and I forgot to fix it, so I apologize for spelling programming wrong. But this is where that vocabulary becomes really important, because if you had shown this to me when I was sitting in a 6th grade classroom, I'd be like, I know maybe what 2 of those mean. So this is where you really need to break down the vocabulary. What does modeling and simulation mean? What does data analysis mean when you're talking about it from a computational thinking? Abstraction and decomposition. Well, maybe you know decomposition when you're thinking about it from a math perspective. You might break down a problem to solve it. But what does it mean from computer science standards? What's an algorithm actually beyond just, oh, it's a step-by-step procedure? Maybe that you understand, but there's more to it to that. This is where some people go, this is not what I do in my classroom, but I think as we go through, you'll be like, okay, this totally fits in our classrooms, and you'll see why as we go through. All right, so I'm going to play a video. Make sure I'm still optimizing sound. Yep, okay. So if you come back to my screen, if you're on your screen, I'm just going to play it on the main screen here. But this is a really great intro to computer science video that I like to show, no matter which level I'm doing, I like to show this one.
Computational thinking is a set of problem-solving techniques that we use here at Google. One aspect of computational thinking is decomposition, where we take a large problem and we break it down into smaller pieces. Another aspect is pattern recognition. We use pattern recognition to help us identify similarities and differences. The final part of computational thinking is algorithmic design. That allows us to create a step-by-step strategy for solving a problem. Google Earth is a perfect example of computational thinking because it takes a large problem of trying to visualize the entire planet and makes it so that anybody can explore the world around them.
All right, I forgot I had questions that were
Google Earth is basically an attempt to recreate the whole world in 3D. And we want to make it as if it's the real world. We don't want to make anything up. We don't want to create anything or invent anything. We want to make it the real world. And initially it seems like this crazy problem if you really think about it. The world is huge. It takes a tremendous amount of data. If we were to try to send this to you, we'd have to pull up in front of your house with tractor trailers full of hard drives of all the images. So it seems kind of impossible, but we make it possible. In school, you're given these problems that are very black and white. You either have the answer or you don't have the answer. You got it right or you got it wrong. In the real world, there are many right answers.
Google Maps is a collection of imagery and data about places and roads all around the world. And using Street View, we actually have images from cars right along all of the streets. Once we've collected all this imagery, we have to somehow put it together in a way to be able to share it with the world. Not long ago, I started getting annoyed with Pegman. Pegman is the little yellow guy on Google Maps that you can drag to get into Street View. And so you drag Pegman from the corner in Google Maps and you drop him on the street you want to get into and look at. That works great when you know exactly where you want to go, when you want to zoom all the way in on a single address and drop him next to a house or something. But say you just want to go to New York.
All right.
New York City. When I drag and drop Pegman, he'd fall somewhere, well, somewhere random. In fact, he seems to prefer to land in back alleys. He didn't mind landing in the middle of a field. He'd land on big highways, but he'd almost never land in front of a famous landmark. And if you dropped on Paris, he'd never, ever land on the Eiffel Tower. I thought to myself, we can do better than that. We kind of know what famous places are in the world. We should fix this. I began to think to myself, what makes a panorama, one of these images in Street View, important? And then I thought about it further. I thought, when people go to places that are interesting, when they physically travel there, what do they always do when they're in a famous place?
Well, I'm gonna let
They
you
pull out their
answer.
camera and start taking pictures. People post a lot of these pictures to the internet. So we could look for places that people take a lot of pictures. We can find things that are in those photographs that people took and see if we can find the same things in the Street View images. And so if we can see the Eiffel Tower in the Street View image, and we can see it in a bunch of images people took, we can automatically know that it's probably important. We've worked really hard to make Pegman smarter. When he's dropping from the sky, we want him to land somewhere interesting.
Thinking computationally is a lot more like art than it is like math class. You go in and you know you want to.
I just love this statement. That's why I paused it here, but it's computational thinking is a lot more like art than math class. And then just think to yourself, how can you harness this statement with students?
You want to create something and you have a blank canvas and you use math and you use these tools to paint on that canvas and you end up creating something beautiful.
So I like to share that one when I start with talking about computational thinking, because I think it brings it to a level that you can understand. They never said the word coding. And I think that's important because most people, as soon as they hear computational thinking, they think coding. Is it part of it? Yes, but there's so much more to it. And I think that's a great video to kind of show. And Google Earth, if you've never used it, I hope you have, is fabulous for students to do some really creative projects. And they can really get down, like they were saying, to Street View using Pegman and take a look at different places. They have timelines on it, so you can see what a place looks like over time. You could do some really cool things with Google Earth. All right, so let's talk about the vocabulary that has to do with computational thinking. We're going to play a game. So if you're not on your Nearpod, go back to your Nearpod. I'll put the link in the chat one more time if you got out of it and need to get back into it. There you go. And we'll get you on. I'm going to randomize the answers, but I'm going to shut off the sound so you don't have to listen to the music. We'll do underwater since it's summer. And what you're going to do on your screen is pick a character and click the start button. The game doesn't actually start until I hit start on my end, but I want to wait for all 14 of you, 13 of you to get on. And I will show names so you guys can see the leaderboard, who's on the leaderboard. Give you another minute to get logged in. Pick a character, make sure you hit start on your end. And this is really just to help you see some of the vocabulary. When I first did the vocabulary, I tried a really different type of activity and it just didn't go well because it's hard. The vocabulary is hard. So I found that this was a little bit more accessible, less fear when you're playing a video game like this. So I'm going to start at about 5 seconds and then you're just going to do the questions on your screen. You're going to see the questions. If you've never played Time to Climb in Nearpod, you're going to see all of the questions on your screen. You're going to pick the answer. There'll be 4 choices. The faster you pick the answer, the more points you get, so the higher you get to climb the mountain. All right, let's get started. You have 30 seconds per question to get the answers. You guys are fast on that one. Sonia is holding the lead. Julie, you have taken over the lead. Wow, we get a new leader after every question. Kristen's now our leader. We have Carrie, now we have William as the leader. I think all of you have been the leader at least once. Last question. Let's see if Carrie can hold that lead. Well done. We Carrie in first. William is so close, only 7 points behind in second. Then Kristen, Julie, and so on. Yeah, good job. You got this. That's exactly right. You are ready for computer science. If you don't know those words, it's okay. A lot of those vocabulary words are more important for the high school and maybe even the middle school. Some of them you're definitely going to need to know for the younger grades. But again, it's just exposing yourself to the vocabulary. And then again, those of you who are going to be using these standards in your classroom, helping your students know what these words actually mean and start to use them. You know, don't think you need to know it right away. I'm not going to make you do the crossword just for the sake of time, but you'll have it. This is the glossary that the New York State has put together for you. So I wanted you to have access to it if you want to click it and save that in another tab, or just know it's on the NYSED website. But it's going to give you some of those words. I obviously didn't put them all in. I just did some of them just to kind of give you an idea. I only pulled ones that had to do with computational thinking, but there are ones for all of the standards in here. And it really does explain them first from both like the process side and from the product side as far as how you're going through them. Yeah, the game is fun. All right, so the standards. We're going to really take a look again at that placemat. I'll give you some time to kind of look at the standards, the nouns, the verbs, and those statements. And then we're going to hop in to take a look. So if you haven't had a copy, I put it in here again of the actual state PDF. This is the one that actually breaks down the standards in the other form, the one I kind of showed you at the beginning versus the one that I'm using is on my screen. So again, if you want to copy and paste that into a new tab, you can keep that open as I go to the next page. All right, so I'm going to give you a minute to take a look. Again, you have the same, it's the same document, so go down from impacts of computing, but this time I want you to take a look at the computational thinking. I'll give you just a couple minutes to take a look at those nouns, verbs, and the in your own word statements. So it's 10:30, I'll give you till 10:35. Any questions on what you just looked over? Biggest takeaways I get when I show these is in the verbs. It's not as scaffolded on the computational thinking. If you're thinking of Bloom's, it tends to get to a level and kind of stay. You don't see create as often. You do see some create, but you see a lot of identify. You see a lot of like demonstrate, that kind of thing, but identify is kind of the big one, which is more of a lower level. So you know, as you get up into the higher, obviously there are some bigger things, the design, create, remix, those kind of words. But just be aware that some of these, it kind of hits a level and then stays versus continuously climbs. All right, because the continuous climb is when you get to those AP classes for the computational thinking. So just be aware of that. But other than that, I haven't heard a ton of thoughts on this one, other than I'm not sure how I'm going to do this in my classroom. Is that how some of you are feeling? Is I'm not sure how to tell teachers they can do this in their classroom? We're all good. Okay. All right. So let's move on to computational thinking level 1, and let's talk about the curriculum. So we've got modeling and simulation. I have it in the other format for this group just because I pulled them for different presentations, and I want you to be able to see the other way it looks on that, you know, from the spreadsheet to the actual paragraphs or the actual PDF. So you have your grade bands, you have your identifier, and you have your standard number. We're in modeling and simulation. This first one is identifying and describing patterns. So pattern recognition, super easy to do with the younger grades because we talk about patterns a lot in the younger grades. But then at the upper grades, how we think about the outcomes of those patterns and how they work is sometimes harder, you know, to kind of figure out and to do. So let's take a look at an example. And I'm going to let you play the game for a second if you'd like while I talk. This game is called Semantris. It's a machine learning game. It's a Google experiment. You have 2 different games you can play. One's more arcade style and one is more a little slower, put it that way. But it's a word association game. So you have to pick a word that's going to allow for some of those blocks to disappear to be able to categorize them. So as you're getting into the middle and upper, this might be a fun way for you to talk about the pattern recognitions. All right, and in a fun way. Again, you can go back to the impacts of computing. What's the, you know, those word associations, what does it mean? Is there any bias in it? You can have those conversations, but at this level, what we're looking for is, do they understand the patterns? Can they identify what the outcomes are going to be? By them choosing the right word, like if it lists a bunch of foods and they say dinner and it pulls them all, they really created that category. They were able to organize the data. But if it lists a lot of foods and they say ocean, well, we have an issue. Let's talk about that. Why did it pull those words? And maybe was it the best word and that sort of thing. For the youngers, some of the state ed examples, they talk about doing some unplugging type of activities with number patterns. So this is a great one you can do with math. You can talk about the life cycle of animals, which I think I have a slide on coming up anyway. Tessellations, nature, you know, patterns, like looking at butterfly wings and talking about it, different patterns there. Really a lot you could do with this one that is fun for kids and really can be very engaging for kids. So I know we had a few other people that just joined. And I don't know if you were here before or not, so I'm just going to give you that link to what we're doing. I'm going to give you a minute to play the game. It's fun. I get caught up in it, but you can play the arcade or the block. All right, so you had a little time to play. Kids love this game. You can definitely have some competitions. I used to always have butcher paper in the back of my room with magic markers, and I let kids put different things up there. And one kid always liked to put their top scores on it when we played games in the classroom and stuff like that. So absolutely a fun thing to do with your kids as you're going through. All right, sorry if you're having fun. I'm going to make the game go away on you. Another great resource for you is actually from Utah, this Education Network site. This is a Patterns in Nature website. I don't know who, sorry, Julie. She wrote no. I don't know. The fact that this is put together is pretty remarkable to me, but it gives you places, people, things to do on the topic. So really great resource for your younger classes, maybe elementary level for these. But you can see over on the left, there's also some higher end math where you can look at patterns, and you can even do some different things with music and art. So this might be a really great location for your teachers to go to say, all right, I got to figure out computational thinking. I want to start with patterns because that's a little bit more achievable. And here's some really great resources for you to do that. Somebody asked, does the New York State site have a list of resources that teachers can explore for each standard? No, not yet, Stephanie, but that is definitely something I'm working on at my Voices with my ed tech group to try to have something. The packaging has been the hardest part for me. And actually at the end of the day, depending on how much time we have left, I'll show you what I've been working on and you can maybe help me with that because I don't know how to organize it so it's easy for teachers to be able to gain the access. A website might be the best. Right now I have it at Book Creator so we can figure that out. So maybe you guys can help me with that. All right, so this is, again, great site for patterns in nature. There's other stuff on here, so this is a great website for whoever you would like to have access to it. I think this is super cool because all of these go out to different websites for different things that you can do. All right, so let's look at the next two standards. So we have computational 3 and computational thinking 4. And again, we're talking about data. And then we're getting into, and that's within the data analysis visualization. And then when we get to the abstraction and decomposition, we're starting to break it down into smaller steps. When we're talking about abstraction, I always say Mad Libs. That's my easiest way to understand abstraction. You're still doing the trip to the zoo, and you're just taking out some different words, but the story is still happening at the zoo. You're just changing what's happening at the zoo based on your nouns and verbs and so on. That's the easiest way to make sure you understand abstraction. Is it more than that? Yes, but that gives you an idea. And then decomposition is breaking things down into smaller parts. All right, so we're really saying, here's the task. Like, how do you tie your shoes? And then the students are going to break down each of the steps within that task. That's what we're talking about for decomposition. All right, so you could do anything along those lines with it. This is a resource that somebody shared with me, and I thought this was really cool. It's second grade, so share with your second grade teachers, but this is plant and animal relationships. These are already made resources for you on different things along those lines. So you're talking about, seed dispersion and disposal. You can do this with, this one's actually with Ozobot. So you can bring in some robotics into here. I want to try these out. These are on my to-do this semester or this school year, try out these different ones because these are new resources for me, but I thought this was pretty cool. All right, now we're going to get into 5 and 6. So here we're breaking down the rest of abstraction and decomposition, and we're getting into algorithms and programming. So again, there's tons of different resources you could do with these types of activities, but here we're recognizing that tasks can be done, but maybe you give more detail to some than others. So a perfect example is you have students that come up to your desk and say, where are scissors in your classroom? Some kids you'll be like, it's in the drawers, and they can figure it out, right? Other kids you might be like, it's in the center drawer near the back. You have to give more specific examples because they're, those types of kids that need more detail. So thinking about how you would do a task and how much detail is actually needed that you can still get that same result. That's what we're thinking about in the abstraction and decomposition. So you want to try to use, maybe you can do something. It's kind of like go back to editing. You write a paragraph, maybe you only need to do it in 3 sentences and you have 15. How do you get the rest of that stuff? We always called it the fluff, right? When you wrote, to get the fluff out to make sure that the meaning is really there. And then when we're getting to the algorithms and programming, now we're really starting to talk about the coding side, step-by-step procedures. How do we get from our desk to the front door? How do we get to the playground? How do we, build a peanut butter jelly sandwich or, make it more cultural, a food, that they would actually eat in their homes? How are those things done? How does that happen? When I was in the classroom, I worked with a teacher in Vietnam and we did a day in the life videos between our two schools. This was pre-Flipgrid years, where technology was easy. So we made like iMovies and put them on a spreadsheet and shared them off to each other. But we did a day in the life, and they had to do a step-by-step of I get up, what I eat for breakfast, if they eat breakfast, what transportation do they take to school, what do they do during their school day, what do they do after school. So you had to break it down into these steps. That's your step-by-step algorithm. And just in case you wanted to know, sixth graders are most fascinated by the difference in breakfast foods between the kids that live in Vietnam and us. We eat sugar for breakfast. They eat noodles and dumplings and all sorts of really delicious things. So they have soup for breakfast, which is yummy. So we're talking about this level 5 when we're really talking about understanding the step-by-steps and how you can follow an algorithm to get that through. It could be something as simple as an activity where you have a student take something and bring it to another classroom. How did you do it? What were the steps to make that happen? Or it could be something more in-depth, like the Rubik's Cube. You could talk about the algorithms that are built into doing the Rubik's Cube. My favorite one, origami. There's nothing wrong with teaching your kids how to do origami. I learned how to make a paper boat in the 3rd grade. I still know how to do it. I can grab a piece of paper and I can fold it. It was a great trick. When my kids were little at restaurants, they'd give the paper placemats. I made every single one of them into a boat because the kids needed to be entertained. And now they can make paper boats too. They can learn at a very young age how to do this. So simple origami to follow a step-by-step procedure. And then you can talk about what happens if I give you the wrong direction. What happens if you didn't follow one of the directions right? What happens if my directions weren't clear? And you can have those conversations to talk about algorithms and debugging and that sort of thing. All right, and then as we get into 7 and 8, we're totally into algorithms. This is really your coding. And then we're talking about identifying information, understanding program and data structures, really the step-by-steps within a task. I'll give you a second to kind of read that because there's a lot on that page. So I was in a 7th grade or 8th grade French class this year, and we were they had me in to teach the kids how to use Google Earth. They were creating their own virtual tours, like if they were going on a vacation and they got to travel all these different places. And one of the things they had to do was show the directions on where they got from place to place. And that really was computational thinking, where they could, maybe they're going from the airport to the Eiffel Tower. There's hundreds of different ways to go. Which path did they choose? Was it the most direct path? How much time did it take? Was there a better way to do it? That's computational thinking. That's really organizing the ideas to be able to create something. And it was done in French class. This can be done with composing music. What are the steps on building a good song? And what parts do you need? It could be take them to the library. All right, which books are taken out the most? Oh, the science fiction books are taken out the most, but historical fictions really aren't. How could you reorganize the library so that they're more visible, so that students are taking out more historical fiction?
MIT Scratch programming language curriculum has a lesson on doing a dance with an audience where someone has to watch the person on the screen doing the dance and give directions while the audience watches and doesn't give feedback. And it turns into something that's really fun, but exactly the whole idea is you're giving step-by-step instructions, and then you're discussing the feedback and what did you know and what words did you use that were familiar for someone to try to understand what you were saying. And the person receiving the directions is not allowed to ask any questions.
Yeah, I've done that with mazes, having them get through a maze that way. And if they get stuck, they're not allowed to ask a question. You just have to explain, the person that's supposed to direct them through has to help them out. Before we went to Lucy Calkins, the school I worked at, the writing workshop, I used to do a how-to essay in my 6th grade class, and I think the how-to is now like a 2nd grade assignment, if I remember correctly, in Writer's Workshop. But this is a great place to have these standards happen in your English class, because that's when you're saying how to do something, how to build something, how to organize something. I remember, and again, you want to pick some culturally relevant food item, but having them build for my group, peanut butter and jelly worked just fine. The group I was with, I had them actually do that, and then I would build the steps based on how they were doing that. And all of a sudden they're like, put the peanut butter on the bread, and you pick up the jar and put it right on top of the bread, and like, oh, I got to explain how to get the peanut butter from the jar onto the bread. So you have to think about those steps to make it clear for your readers or the computer to be able to do it. So absolutely great ideas. And again, I didn't have to use coding for that. I didn't have to use a coding program. Could you? Absolutely. Do I recommend it? Absolutely. But there are ways to do it that doesn't have to be using something new, a new tool. It can also be, I'm looking at other things from the state ed. They said, read lyrics of a song and label the different components. What's the verse? What's the chorus? What are the parts that make a song a song? That could be done in music class to be able to talk about that. Art, you could talk about the mediums that are being used and the different parts of the structure. Show them an image that like has multiple things in it. How many triangles are in this image, and pull it apart and think about it. That's some of the things that you can do that could be really fun for kids within the classroom. Other questions on 7 and 8? Because I feel like I'm buzzing through computational thinking pretty fast on you. So I mentioned that animal classification is a great way to do it. I built this animal classification bingo board on Fluency as an example, but you can build it anywhere. It doesn't have to be Fluency. But the idea here is, and if I open it up for you, what the students would do is they would click the little link button that's right next to the arrow, and that would take them out to Flippity. They spin the spinner, and you could use any spinner program. I just use Flippity, and they got a mammal. And what they would do is they would put this in edit mode, and they would move one of the bingo chips. Let me just put this in edit mode here. They'd move a bingo chip onto a mammal. So they would do that and try to get bingo as they were going through. Really fun activity for your kids to do. This can be done as a center. It can be done as group work. The idea here is that they're just getting some exposure to understanding how you can sort and analyze and look at data. We talked about mazes. This is an online one because I was thinking virtual with everything we were doing this year. How could you move those mazes that you often do in your classroom onto a virtual environment? The mazegenerator.net will allow you to make any size, any shape maze that you would like, and then the students can give each other directions to get through it. This could be a great partner activity where the student generates a maze and then has to walk somebody through it. And it has to be step by step, however you want them to give directions. So great way to do this. I used to use mazes all the time in the classroom. I had, the blue tape, the painter's tape, and I would put it all over the floor to do different things with Spiros or have the students do different things with different robots. We built a miniature golf course. We built puppy play places, all of those different things where they had to code the robots to go different ways. And then, we'd have them practice by walking through it to see if it would actually work that way. And then we're getting to the last two of the computational thinking. I'll give you a second to read through those. So again, when we're looking at that top one, the 9, that's your debugging. That's where I say any editing, you're going to have them use debugging. That's a great one to kind of compare it to. Maybe it's steps in a science experiment. It's a step in a math problem, and they have to figure out where they made their mistake. Easy one to hit. And then the 10, they have to collaboratively plan the steps at the kindergarten level to design at the high school level something that's going to show how you do something. So Storyboards. This is a fabulous time to do storyboarding. I love choose your own adventure stories. That'd be a great one to build in, where they have the steps, and based on what they choose, it goes off to different locations. So it could be something as simple as how to pack up your backpack. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It just needs to be something that the kids have to explain the design process to get something done. Another example, code.org has a great one on mazes that you can take a look at. I think the video is going to start on me. No, it didn't. Okay. So you can totally go through and debug the code to figure out left, right. This is a very young one because it's just arrows, no words, but you can certainly do this at any level that you need your students to be able to do that. Another one I just want to give you again is the I want to give you time to think about what you already do. So in this, on this Padlet, add in resources you use. Do you use Ozobots? You know, and those of you who have multiple districts, what does your district use to cover the computational thinking concepts? Personally, I used Wonder Workshop a lot, and I used Spiros a lot in the classroom. I've dabbled in drones and Ozobots. SoniCuve is a big one I use now because we have them at our BOCES. So tell me what you use to cover the standards, or tell me something you do to cover the standards. Like Julie said, the dance idea, that's a great one. Breaking down dances. Again, that can be done in music class, it can be done in gym class. So you can have some different things in there. Yeah, the Ozobots. Spiros, Scratch, code.org, yeah. And again, before you use any of these, make sure that you're checking with the tech directors, check with the districts, make sure they have the signed Law 2D contracts with any of these. Yeah, building step-by-step how-to books. That's a fabulous way to go through these standards. That's often the hardest part for kids too, right? Is how to organize things, how to organize ideas. And that's computational thinking. So that's a great thing to work with your students on. Any questions on computational thinking? All right, so what's going to happen next? And I'm going to give you our break for lunch. Here's what I think I'll do. I'll do networks and systems and then break you for lunch, because this will probably take like 15 minutes. This is such a small part. And then I'll send you off, 15 minutes, maybe half an hour. You'll either eat lunch at 11:15 or 11:30. Does that work for you guys? Okay, let's do that instead of going super early. And then when we come back, we'll finish up. But networks and systems design is a really small part, and I don't think it's going to take a ton of time for us to go through. And then we'll do the cybersecurity and digital use for the afternoon, and we'll be done. And that gets a little bit headier. So networks and systems design is broken down into two sub-concepts: hardware and software, networks and the internet. That's it. We're just talking about two areas that of the focus. We're talking about the hardware and software, so the parts of a computer, and then where is your data stored and how is it transmitted. You have this again, same thing. If you go down and look at the networks and systems on this placemat, I'm just going to scroll down real quick and kind of go over those for you. Here we're looking at the nouns and verbs again. Identify to design, identify to explain and design, identify to develop and communicate, identify to describe. So it starts at a base level, identify. By the end, they should be able to talk about it. That's really what we're looking for in this standard. That's the design process. It's being able to identify the parts. That's what we're looking at here. So the first, I'll share the link to all the Padlets to you again. I'll do it when we go to break. Julie, just remind me if I forget. So the first one, Oh, I think I've got NSD2 in there. Did I miss one? Well, let me tell you what NSD1 says. Let me grab it here. Might have missed it. So NSD1 is talking about input and output. Yeah, I might have missed that one. So input and output for NSD1 is how is data received through, like right now I'm using my AirPods for my audio. So how is the input sound coming into the AirPods and how is it coming out for you to be able to hear me? So you're thinking about that sort of thing. Using sensors, that's what we're talking about in NSD1. I'm sorry it's missing from the slide deck. I'll have to get that in, unless I have it out of order, and then we'll get to it. And then NSD2 is identifying parts. So here we have identify the basic hardware parts that are found in computing devices to explain the levels of interaction existing between the application software, system software, and hardware in the network system. So here you could be thinking about an invention, and then you're going to think about how they would improve on that invention using today's technology. So it's a great impact of computing tie into networks and systems design that you can do there. All right, and then the third one here, what this one is really talking about is troubleshooting. So you're looking at what's working, what's not working with your hardware. So the student is like, it's not working. Well, explain it, describe it. How do you think you can fix it? Maybe you have a student help desk that helps out with that goes around and helps students with different things. So you can absolutely think about this NSD3 as your troubleshooting one. So you know, the students like my iPad won't turn on. Well, is it charged? Let's plug it in and find out. Trying to troubleshoot on their own is going to help them with this standard. Simple one again for your teachers to do in the classroom. All right, so another just quick drag and drop. Again, I'm not going to make you do it. I'm sure you can name the parts of the computer, but that's a simple one you can do within this category to say, here are the parts, and maybe you can even do one that's what's wrong with the computer and maybe show it unplugged or something plugged into the wrong port, whatever it happens to be, you can have them do that sort of thing. All right, you don't have to do the drag and drop. And then the fourth one, what we're talking about here in systems and designs is what are the rules? What are the responsibilities? How does data get transmitted? How is it getting from your computer to the cloud? Where is that data stored? All right, so that was a big thing with EdLaw 2D is where is the data that we have for our students stored? One of the big things with Google and why we were able to finally use Google effectively under EdLaw 2D is they had to agree that our data would be stored within the continental United States. So same idea here. We're talking about how you can communicate one thing to another and how is that data moved, stored, or referenced. Fun activity with this one, Morse code, right? We're talking about you're sending data, but you're using a code to do it. That's a great way to do it. You can have your students play the telephone game and talk about what are the drawbacks to it, how does it work, and do things like that. So here's a Morse code game that is also a Google experiment. They give you an example one online, but if your kids have devices, they can do it on an iPad or a phone. Here's the link if you'd like it. It's morse.withgoogle.com. You play a demo on the desktop or you can set it up on your phone and you can learn Morse code. All right, moving on to 5. So this one is identifying the physical devices that can store. So we talked about where is it stored, but now you're identifying what can be stored. And then this is really where emerging technologies comes in. So at the younger grades, we're talking about where is data stored. So maybe it's stored on your computer. Maybe you use a thumb drive or a flash drive or something like that. You're talking about the basics of where your data is and how to get to it. You know, that's where you might have a conversation or teach them about using Google Drive or OneNote or those kind of things. But as you're getting to the high school level, you're really taking a look at what is the impact of these networks and what emerging technologies are coming. Again, ties very nicely into the impacts of computing. Here is this Padlet. Let me grab the link. Oh, and that's change the privacy. So you should be able to edit it. Save. Copy link. All right, so take a second and think about where you would put these standard ideas, like these ideas for these standards is a better way to put it. So this is one that I will tell you I don't have a ton of examples for yet. But what I do have, and I'll share a couple ideas with you for these standards, how a computer works. There's a great video from code.org. That's the one I was talking about with the women that use wearable technology to build their clothes. There's a really funny video on rotary phones, like two teenage boys try to learn how to dial a phone number. That's a great one. I showed you the Morse code one. There's a really great video. I do it more with Access, but you could definitely do it with networks and systems about how you gather information or how information is stored with Soul Pancake. There's a great one there. I go over more of them with the Train the Trainer. Yeah, build a computer or break it apart. Absolutely, that's a great idea that you can do. Build a computer. Absolutely. Give me another minute on here. This is definitely an area that I'm struggling finding activities. So if your teachers come up with any good ones, please share them with me. The state ed examples are great. I wanted to get some more ideas. All right. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave this question one up. We're going to do cybersecurity and digital use after lunch. It's 11, even earlier than I thought. See, I didn't think networks and systems would take long. Do you guys want to come back right at noon and do the last two? Give you almost a full hour for a break, stretch, answer your emails, that sort of thing. Does that sound good? All right, come on back at noon. I will keep this open, so you're welcome to stay on, but I'm going to pause the recording. And then when we come back, we'll cover the last two, take any questions you have at the end, and we'll let you go through your day. All right, so I'll see you at noon. As everyone's coming back, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in or unmute and ask. We'll get started in about 2 more minutes. Yeah, I love the question that came in the chat. It says, what are ways to integrate this easily and what to say to teachers that get pushback because their plates are already full. And that is so true. That is the biggest thing here is, teachers' schedules are full. I would say the best approach is to see what they already do and then think about ways that this can just enhance what they're doing instead of it being another load. It shouldn't be an additional thing that they do. It should be integrated into what they do. So, kind of like some of the examples we were talking about, you could do this in English class, you can do this in social studies class. That's where you want to start to break this down with your teachers as you're going through, and if you're training them, you definitely want to take some time to say, here's the standard, here's what it could look like. What do you do in your classroom that already makes that happen? That could be a Padlet that they can write them down. It could be a stop and jot. It could be a discussion if you're in the room with people, which would be so nice to do in person trainings. You could have a piece of paper on the wall. What do you already do for this standard? I just did that with a group of STEM teachers. And a lot of what they were saying they were doing was they were really trying to cover the science standards in their STEM class because they felt like it wasn't really being hit in the classroom. But when we had the discussion of where things did belong, we talked about how you could, kind of cross into the classroom, and it doesn't just have to be science that you do it, and it's not math. Most people think computational thinking really belongs in math, but when you look at them, and we actually took the time with my ed tech cohort, we looked at what the standards were and where do they align with the lifelong learning practices on the other strands. We looked at ELA, science, social studies, and math. And we found that ELA is where a lot of this belongs because a lot of it just makes sense there. And granted, the lifelong practices are pretty generic versus breaking it down to the actual standard. But when you're doing standard alignment or you're writing curriculum together, think about where you can start to integrate these standards. And remember that they bridge more than one grade level. So it's not just kindergarten that has to do all of these standards. It's kindergarten, first grade have to do all these standards. So maybe they don't have to do every single one every day in class. Deborah, did you have a question?
Look, Lori, can I add too? One thing that I have been finding to be very helpful is on the state ed website, there's an entire PDF and it's standards examples. And that really, they have 3 examples for each standard, and that really makes sense to me. And then I think when you read these, then you can figure immediately what kind of technology you can use to support these examples. Or
yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
I agree. I'm going to put that in the chat here. Somebody was asking for it. Let me just grab it. And I did have it on the Padlets. It was linked on each of the Padlets. So if you happen to have one of those open, that was the document that was on there were the examples. So let me grab that. And it is, some of them give you more examples than others, but they definitely give you some good ideas. And I do think that that's the work you need to be doing with your educators. If you're a tech coach or you do something like I do, where you push into districts and have to go over this, is look at the standard, look at the examples. What do you already do to meet that one? 9 times out of 10, they do something that maybe with a little tweak will fit, or it totally fits already. And there may just be some other things they have to do in their classroom to be able to make that happen. I say the easiest point of entry is common vocabulary. Identifying what vocabulary they need to know at each grade level and make sure that teachers start using that on a regular basis so students get exposed to that.
It's a great idea. Yeah, I put Post-its. I just put jotted little projects that I do regularly or have done that align with some of the examples that were provided on that doc.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Another question came in that says, I find some of the standards overwhelming, so content and grade level teachers might as well. How long would it take to master them? Will they change often? Great questions. They shouldn't change any more than your standards typically do. There'll be rewrites as time goes on, but these have been adopted. So you're not going to see any major changes to them anytime soon. And they're not fully required to be integrated into your classroom until 2024. So now is the time to start doing that PD and that capacity building, thinking about where it fits in curriculum. And that way you have from 2021 to 2024 to figure that part out, to be able to think about how you can integrate them. I think that it would be really a good idea to start, small, pull a few of the standards that are fairly easy, get used to doing those lessons in the classroom, and then build from there, so it won't seem so overwhelming. No different than when you're learning, we all kind of jumped in, feed first last March, but no different than teachers had to learn in LMS. They had to learn how to use a video system like a Zoom or a Google Meet. Those sort of things take time to learn, but they need to have practice and they need to have a safe place to do that. And it could be a training like this one. It could be, a quick little meeting. It could be pushing into common planning time if your teachers are fortunate enough to have that. It could be a newsletter, where between now and 2024, you pull apart one area and you say, here are some ideas that you can do for this one. Try this out in your classroom this week and we'll talk about it. Share your results with it. This is your time to kind of take it as slow as you want to go to make sure that they're ready come 2024 for it. Any other questions before we move on to cybersecurity? So yes, and the CAP that I'm on with the state, we are talking about crosswalks documents. That's definitely something that I'm trying to do with my EdTech cohort that we have here at my BOCES, to be able to see about the crosswalk. We started with the lifelong practices just because we were trying to understand the what each of the standards was asking. But what I'm finding is that really right now people need examples. So that's kind of been our work this year, has been going through and starting to think about examples. That's the work we're going to continue. But as we build those examples, we want to try to have a math example, a science example, a social studies. We want to try to have examples within those grade bands to kind of help you see what it could look like. So the state says, yes, there'll be something. I don't know when that's going to happen. Any other questions? All right. So we're going to jump in. Just wanted to check one more thing here. Okay, so we did networks and systems. Let me go past it because I went back to the questions one. So we're going to start with cybersecurity. So cybersecurity, you're going to start to notice some trends here. You're going to start to notice that some of what we talk about in cybersecurity, we covered in impacts of computing. And some of the things you saw in impacts of computing, you're going to see either in this one or in the next one when we talk about digital use. Here's where they just have a different lens, but the concepts can be very similar, which again is going to help your teachers, because it's not that they have 5 concepts they got to cover and they're all vastly different. They've got these 5 concepts, but there's a lot of overlap. So one lesson is going to hit more than one thing. All right, so let's talk about cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is broken down into 3 different levels. With impacts to computing one, we talked about how this is the society. We're saying, what are the ethics behind it? How does this impact society, right? How does it impact access for people? How does it, what careers are there? When we're looking at cybersecurity, we're really looking at you. How are you vulnerable? What can you do to safeguard your information? What is your response if there's been a breach? All right, so this is more the individual side of things, where impacts of computing is at a broader scale. Obviously, if there's a data breach, it affects many people, so there's your society piece. But really, we're talking about it as far as making sure that you're safe and that your information is safe. All right, just to go down again to the that placemat activity. Going to scroll down till we get to cybersecurity. When we do this as the train the trainer, I have these as separate documents instead of one large one to make it a little easier. But you'll notice that it goes from identify to determine. It goes from identify to explain. There's no create in here. Encode, decode, model, evaluate. These are pretty low level Bloom's kind of words. Evaluate can get a little higher up on there. But these are making sure you understand versus making sure you can create, you could teach these concepts. So you see them at more a base level or a mid-level than you see at an advanced level, which is good because this is all fairly new to us, as we're going through and thinking about cybersecurity. So let's take a look at the first standards. I'm going to give you a second to read this first standard here. I know it's teeny tiny. And this one, I would say teachers are already doing. What information do you have to keep private? Which information should you share? Who do you share your passwords with? How do you make sure that your personally identifiable information is protected? I think Ed Law helps a lot with this. I think the fact that we have to do yearly training in our districts on cybersecurity around Ed Law 2D is helping us with this. So once we understand it, we're better at helping our students understand it. So at a very basic level, students could think about a bulletin board, that billboard type of idea we talked about earlier, where what's information you want to share out. A lot of kindergarten, first grade teachers, they'll do like those stars and they'll do like an all about me star. What do I want to be when I grow up? What's my favorite color? What's my favorite subject? That's things about you, right? But they're not really personally identifiable information about you unless you use them as your password. So you can start to talk about what's okay to share and what's not okay to share. I'm just going to give you a basic site, the Student Privacy Resource Center. This is just a great website that has some resources for your students, for teachers, and for parents. It might be a good one to kind of share out with parents for a location. Common Sense Education has a ton of resources where we're talking about student privacy. So that one is another great resource for you. All right, the next one in safeguards is the cybersecurity 2, and this is simple ways to keep yourself secure. What are the behaviors of making sure that your information is secure? This could be at the very young ages, practicing logging in and out of things. At the upper grades, it might be reminding people to lock their screens before they walk out, or how to protect their information. And this could be a conversation. It doesn't have to be a full lesson. So if you want to do a lesson on it, there's a great one from Common Sense Education and code.org called Powerful Passwords. This is a great one that you can do with your students that walks you through. It's about a half hour, 45 minutes to do the whole lesson, but you're giving them a chance to think about what makes a good password. For cybersecurity 3, you're going to identify why someone might choose to share an account. This could be that we share Disney Plus with my family, but I don't share it with my neighbor. And then what are your trade-offs of selecting security? So this could be that pop-up, that says, do you agree to these terms and conditions on this website? Nowadays, all the websites have to say, we're going to collect cookies, and you can make some of those choices. It's making them conscious choices versus just clicking through. All right, there's a great video on YouTube by Jenna, I think it's Jenna Kingsley. She does these like comedic kind of things, but she does one on terms and conditions where she has a stand in the middle of a busy, park or something like that. And all they have to do is sign up to get a free iPad. But they click through the agreement, click through agreements, the terms and conditions. And as soon as they do that, she'll turn around and say, oh, what made you decide to be an organ donor? Or here's your child that you just adopted, or your dog that you just adopted. She does all these awkward things that people don't realize they've just signed off on because they signed the terms and conditions. It's funny, but it's a little uncomfortable when you start to think about that this is what we do every day. So having those conversations at the upper levels might be enough to do that. You could certainly take apart one of the privacy policies on something you use in the classroom. Maybe you're going to use Flipgrid. Well, let's look at the privacy policy of Flipgrid. What does it say? What information does it collect? Where does it share my information? What's the trade-off of giving them my information? And you can start to have these really good conversations with your students about, is it okay to just sign up for everything? What does it mean? Snapchat has that location filter. Why do you have that on? Why do people have to know where you are at all times? What's the drawback of that? What security are you giving up by allowing that to happen? Those are the conversations you can have. I'm sure you're all familiar with this one, but Be Internet Awesome is a great way to introduce these concepts. They've added a lot more curriculum to when it first went out. When it first went out, it just had the games, and I remember creating content to go along with it. But now they have slide decks, they have teachers' manuals, so teachers don't have to have a heavy load on this one at the lower grade levels. Let them play the game, then have the conversations about it. All right, cybersecurity 4. This one has a lot of vocabulary to it, but it doesn't have to be hard. I mentioned cryptographic a lot. So this is where if you're teaching teachers how to use these standards, talk about what a cryptograph is. Make sure you're pulling apart what that word means and how it can look in their classroom. If you went into a group of your teachers, how many of them have done breakout EDU or have done the breakout boxes or done a digital breakout or an escape room? If you've done one of those, you've done some things with cryptography or cryptographs. You're doing things where they're decoding, they're pulling apart information that's kind of private or secret messages of any kind. Fun activities to do with kids. They love them. This could be a quick 5-minute beginning of the, entry ticket kind of thing as kids are coming in to do these kind of things. Or you can tie it to a science message or you can make this into some sort of formative assessment to see if they know the information. Lots of ways you can apply this standard without it being a heavy load. Where did you find the cybersecurity games? Are you talking about the Be Internet Awesome ones? Eileen, I'm not sure.
Yes. Is it on that website called Be Internet Awesome? Is that right?
Yes, if you go to Be Internet Awesome, there are 4 different games they play that talk about different areas of internet safety. The sweet spot for this is about 3rd through 5th grade.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so here is an example of one. I'll give you a second to try it. This one should be super easy for you. But this is a picture cryptogram, so really fun activities. This is summer. You can probably figure these out pretty quickly using the chart up above. So this would be, your K3 probably, and you can make them a lot harder as you get up to the higher grades. So go ahead and give that a try. All right, so you can see how fun these could be for kids as they're going through, you know, and building these types of activities. Again, you don't have to do this as a lesson all on its own. It could be part of something else that you're already doing. This is a great time to talk about like the Navajo code talkers, or you know, the Caesar shifts. You know, like Julius Caesar used a shift to be able to code his messages. So it's a great time to talk about history. It's a great time to talk about, you know, how messages are made and sent. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go on. I see you're all doing just fine with that one. The next one is the cybersecurity 5, and this one we're looking at, when is it okay to click on stuff? It's at the very basic level. They get an email, is it okay to click on stuff? And what do you do if you do click on something that you weren't supposed to? Now, we've all fallen for clickbait. We've all clicked on something we weren't supposed to at some point. It happens. The phishing quiz that you see on your screen is one by Google. I do this a lot in PD sessions, so you absolutely can use this with, you know, kids that can read. So middle school, high school, probably level, you can do this. Can you spot if you're being phished? It's I think I have it on the next slide. Do I? No, I didn't put it. Here, let me grab it. It's phishingquiz.withgoogle.com. Put it in the chat for you. Like I said, I do this one a lot with PD sessions because I think this is a great one to understand what you should click and what you shouldn't. So it's a great one to kind of go through. It does make you second guess and question everything, but that's the whole point, is that's what we should be doing before we click stuff on an email. So it's having those conversations. All right, so what I did here is that the Padlet looks a little bit different. Here, what I did is I put the state ones on, and I categorized it based on what the state already said they should have, and then a friend of mine put a few extras on as well. So I'm going to give you another minute to kind of think about how you would do cybersecurity, read through these, and kind of see where you are before we go on to the last part of the day, which is the digital use. So let me grab the copy link. Paste that in. Give you a second to kind of read through those. And if you think of something, add it. If you don't, that's fine, but just give me a chance to take a look at them. Any questions on cybersecurity? Not a big one, right? It doesn't, it ties very nicely into the impacts. You know, if you talk about computational thinking, you're going to be talking a little about signing in and that sort of thing. So I don't think it's a big undertaking for our teachers. All right, let's go to the last one, which is digital literacy. So library media specialists like, woohoo, this is my jam. English teachers are saying the same thing. This one's not so hard, but there's a lot of standards in this one, so we have to think about it. So it's broken down into two parts, digital use and digital citizenship. Digital use is we use technology. How do we make sure that we're using it to leverage ideas, to create, to revise, to edit, those sort of things? How are we going to use it to collaborate and communicate, and, you know, all those things? Digital citizenship is how do we make sure our voice is heard in a global community? How can we be responsible and safe and be a global impactor? And the digital citizenship side. You probably have heard of Common Sense Education. Common Sense Education has a very robust curriculum in the digital citizenship world. The only thing I would add to it that maybe it doesn't do is sometimes it talks a lot about what not to do and not always what to do. So you might want to take it to the next level. DigCit Institute has some great resources for that. ISTE has some fabulous resources for digital citizenship. And I'm going to share some others as we go through. There's a lot out there, but it's just a matter of making sure that we're showing students, not just saying don't do that, but here's some ideas and ways that you can use it effectively to make the world a better place. Just going back down to the placemat, I actually pulled digital fluency out completely for you, so it's a little bit easier to see. You'll notice that it goes from identify to demonstrate. It goes from communicate to contribute. It goes from conduct to evaluate. And then at certain levels, you're creating it all of them, which is important to note that these tend to be the higher end of Bloom's versus some of the other grade bands. All right, identify, explore, transfer, describe to explain and manage, identify to design. All right, so you can see how all of these kind of build. Here I did save or let you see some of the prior skills needed and the anticipated pitfalls. So you can see what they could look like, some potential tools that we thought might work for this. We've done a little more work on these standards than others because I do have a strong library media specialist contingent when we meet. We met as a digital fluency group versus the EdTech cohorts work group. So we were able to just look at this one concept strand, which was really helpful. But you can see some of the things that that we saw as important. The biggest one here that gets a lot of people, and we usually often have these really big conversations, is the very first one because it's about keyboarding. Who is responsible for keyboarding in your districts? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Who's responsible for? And I know some of you work with multiple, so give me an answer too based on the ones you've heard. But in the chat, tell me who's responsible for keyboarding in your district. Tech staff developer, teachers, library media specialist, a computer teacher. Yeah, so it's all over the place. The K-5 teachers, I introduced type to learn, then teachers take over. I like that. Awesome. I get it. I work with 31 school districts in my area, and it's all over the place. Sometimes it's a computer teacher, sometimes it's a computer lab assistant, sometimes it's the librarian, sometimes it is the classroom teacher. Classroom teachers, they always say they don't have time for keyboarding in their classroom. One of the best programs I've seen out there is the Keyboarding Without Tears program. I see a lot of districts use it. What's nice about that program, and it's a paid one, but what's nice about that program is it's fully aligned with your curriculum. So if you actually go in, and a lot of teachers don't bother, they just tell kids to go on it, but if you actually go in, you can bookmark or you can choose them to do certain lessons that align to your math curriculum, that align to your ELA curriculum. So they're learning keyboarding, but they're learning it, practicing the skills you want them to know in your classroom. And even above that, they have a whole digital citizenship lesson packet that you can just assign to kids. They practice their keyboarding and you're hitting the standards. So you don't even have to do any extra load over what you're already doing if you do keyboarding in the classroom. Keyboarding Without Tears says 10 minutes a day. That's all they want. So that could be your, before schoolwork, instead of, teachers always print out that half-page piece of paper that they have students do to get their skills and kids do it quickly and hand it in. Instead of doing that, you can have them do 10 minutes of keyboarding. It could be, I saw a lot over COVID, a lot of teachers would do those must-dos and may-dos, and they would put the must-do as keyboarding 3 times a week for 10, 15 minutes, just as a practice kind of thing. So you want to start to think about how you can integrate that keyboarding in there. and there's a lot of debate over how much keyboarding is really needed because kids can voice type or they type with their thumbs. But we're still not there yet where we can fully say you don't need it. So I still think that is something that's really helpful. Having a high school student, a college student, both of them are so happy that they learned keyboarding, and they did it in like 7th or 8th grade too. But they were so happy they learned it because it's really saves them a ton of time in school. All right, so here's a little fun activity. Can you name the home row on your computer without looking? Give you a second to try it. I can't do it. I have to look down. I can't, I mean, I can type. I took my keyboarding classes, but I can't, I know where they are with my fingers, but I couldn't write the home row on the keyboard.
It's too hard not to look at the keyboard. It's right there.
I know. It's impossible. I'm with you on that. It is hard, I know, but why not have kids do this? Keyboarding Without Tears, I said it on something at NYSED, once, one of their corporate councils, and they gave us this magnetic keyboard that the kids can actually put the keys onto the keyboard. What a great activity for like kindergarten, 1st grade to learn their letters and also placement to see where they go on the keyboard. You know, very tactile. You could certainly print a piece of paper out and have the kids write the letters in and practice, look at their keyboard. This is a good skill for them to use at the younger grades to kind of just get familiar with the keyboard. So I see some of you tried it. Some of you are like, yeah, forget it. That's all right. All right, I'm gonna move on from it. And then let's talk about those 5 standards that you have in digital literacy or digital use. So, so when we're talking about this, the first one we said was keyboarding. I think we've already discussed that one, so I'm not going to give you any other examples on that one. But when we go to DL2, and I'm not giving you the Jamboard, we do this Jamboard activity in the Train the Trainer one. But we talk about this one is how do you communicate and work with others? So this is growth mindset. So this is a good time to take a step and say, what's it like to learn something new? And a lot of teachers really struggle with that because they know their curriculum, they know their routine, they know their classroom, and they don't want to add anything new or change anything because they've got a good flow. They get good results. They're happy with how it works. But what's important is these standards are not going away, first of all, but they're also going to build on each other. So taking a moment for both your students and even for your teachers to spend some time thinking about how do I learn new things can really help them understand how to transfer those skills to some of these new things. So that's kind of what this one's looking at, is how do I work with people? How do I learn new skills? And then, you know, you can break it down from there. All right, so this one should be the Jamboard. So I'm going to skip over that for now and go to, no, I don't, I want to go back. No, that's just the Jamboard. Okay, I thought it was the one I had that was fully done, because I show you that one on the next one. So, all right, we're gonna skip over that one. All right, so the next one, and it says DL3. I wonder if I made a mistake there too. Let me grab DL2. So DL2, I'm scrolling to it and then I will show you. So DL2, oh, we just did that. That's right. We did do DL2. That was the communicate one that we did with the learn something new. That's right. So DL3 is doing searches. So this is where we're looking at, can the students use Google to search for something or whatever search engine you have them using, but can they do it? And can they organize the search? I used to do this a ton with middle schoolers before they did a research project. The teachers would have me come in and teach them how to search on Google, what to look for to know that you're looking at a quality document. Library media specialists do this all the time, where they're helping students to know what's a quality search, what should they be looking for to find that information out. How do they get the results that they're asking for? This website is probably not as well known as it probably should be, but this is Google's lesson plans. So they actually have lesson plans on how to search. So if you look at this website, they've got I have search literacy lesson plans. They have beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So any age group, probably second or third grade up. You can go through about picking search terms, understanding search terms, narrowing your search, searching for evidence, and then credibility, which are all super important lessons. These are already made slide decks that you can use with your students. So if I grab this evaluating one, it's going to open up a Google Doc lesson plan. It has a survey that you can do. It tells you, Common Core standards that are aligned. It gives you all of the resources you need. And then you can go through and do the activity with your students. So they're already made lessons that you can do. There are other lesson plans. I'm only showing you these, but there are other lesson plans. If I go to lesson overview, I can see the different areas. And then if I go to the lesson plan map, it will show what you're going to be doing as far as the guiding questions for each of the categories. All right, so take a look at these, get to know them. They're really helpful. The other thing that's nice is if I toggle over to Google a Day. So Google a Day is a website you can go to. I used to do it with my 6th graders too. And what it does is every day it asks 3 questions. They're non-Googleable questions, but you have to find the answer to them by knowing how to make your search. So the students can't just copy and paste the question into a Google search and find the answer. So it teaches them how to narrow their search using the pluses and negatives and paragraph or quotation marks and all those kind of things. It teaches them how to do that and to find information to speed up that process. So they give you the same 3 questions all day long. So I used to do it like on Mondays with my 1st period class and Tuesdays with my 2nd period and so on. That way everyone had a chance to try it without, my 1st period telling the 9th period class what the answers were. But what's nice about the Google a Day is a lot of them then have lessons that are already tied in. So then it becomes like an enrichment. So if you're on a hyperdoc, you're in that last one where you're going to expand their knowledge. You can see they have culture, geography, history, and science. And these are actual questions they asked on Google a Day. And you can click to see the challenge. And then you're going to actually get the Google a Day that walks you through the answer to that question. So here's the question of what it was to figure out who it was. Here's the answer. Here's what you had to search to help them out. And then background for further discussion to find out more information. Super cool. I love it. And it's already done for you. So not an extra load for your teachers to figure out. All right, DL4. So DL4 is looking at digital tools to create digital artifacts. Been there, done that, right? Although we say that, I was working with a high school English teacher, and she said she wasn't getting her kids engaged in something they were doing, and she was looking for ideas. And I asked her to bring to our meeting examples of the work that students had done, like the creative activities they've done beyond the essay, because it was English class. I knew they wrote the essay. And she took a step back and she goes, I've never had them do anything like that. They've never created a poster, a podcast, a website, a book bento. They've never done anything to create. All they'd ever done is write essays in her class. And but on the other side, oh dear, but on the other side, she had created so many digital things to use in her classroom, really intense, beautiful things. And I said, well, if you get to create, why aren't you not letting your students create? So that's where we need to flip the switch. And a lot of teachers are like this. They're like, well, we use technology. Yes, but are you using Freckle and Khan Academy just following lessons? Are you just doing it to gather data, or are you having your students actually create on it? That Invent Challenge, I forget who posted it in the chat. That's a perfect example of a great thing to get your kids creating. We need to make sure that they're the ones creating the artifacts. So what she did, and I thought it was a fun one, she found on Teacher Pay Teacher. So she didn't create it on her own, but it was a fun one. They were reading Canterbury Tales. So they had to take a paragraph from Canterbury Tales and put it into regular new English, modern English. And then they had to transfer it onto an image that looked like an Instagram post. Yeah, I think it was Instagram, and they had to do it with emojis. So they had to be able to transfer that old English to new English, and then from new English to emojis. And then they hung them up on the wall for kids to try to read their stories. Really fun, and the kids loved it. And she's like, okay, I get it now. So that's what this one's asking for, is to get your students creating, not just using technology, not consuming it, actually creating on it. Questions on that one? Now I'm going to ask you to share. Name your favorite ed tech tools. Flipgrid, fabulous. Goose Chase, that one's a fun one. Nearpod, iMovie, Nearpod, Bunsy. Oh, someone loves Bunsy like me. Google Drawings for infographics, note-taking. Yes. Screencastify, Nearpod, Book Creator. Yes. Code.org, Desmos, Nearpod again. These are all fabulous tools. Now I want you to take a look at this list as they're coming in. Which of these do you have your students create on? So Bunsy, absolutely. I mean, obviously teachers create all the time too, but Bunsy's one that you definitely create on. Google Drawings, are you making the infographic or are they? Are they sketchnoting? On Flipgrid, are they just responding to a prompt with an answer or are they creating something? I worked with a bunch of fifth graders. We did it globally, where every week I'd put out a question about math and then the kids got to write or do a Flipgrid video. And I had one little boy who created stop motion animation to answer the question every week. Totally creative. Didn't ask him to, he chose to do that. So giving them that outlet to use their creativity. Absolutely. All good things.
I lost the link to the I see the code. Never mind.
Oh, you got it? Okay. Well, I got loud all of a sudden for me. My volume is doing some wonky things today, so sorry if I jumped. You got it, Julie? You're all set? I'll put the link in the chat. All right. And then I'm going to fix the volume here too. Just give me a second. Settings. Okay. All right. So the next one is DL5. So DL5, what we're talking about here, and this, by the way, I think you probably see it there. This one doesn't start until 4th grade, which some of the others did as well. But DL5 is talking about identifying common features of digital technologies. So you're really looking at, can you transfer the information from one thing to another? So you're really looking at that ability of maybe last year they came from a school that used Microsoft and they used OneNote, but now you're asking them to use Google Classroom, or they came from a Google school and they use Google Classroom and you're asking them to use Canvas. Can they transfer those skills to something else? And that's really important as they come in, because you might have used Seesaw in 3rd grade, but in 4th grade they use Nearpod, and kids need to be able to transfer those skills. Hardest thing for kids to do is when you have 50 different tech tools that they're using and they have to try to learn to navigate all of those. Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're introducing slowly enough that they can then figure it out and they can transfer those skills. A fun example of this is Quick Draw by Google, where you ask the student, or the computer asks you to draw something, and then as you're drawing it, it tries to use AI to figure out what you're drawing. And you can talk about this again. Impact of technology or computing can really fit into this one, but this could be another one where you have this conversation of could you figure it out on your own? Absolutely. I did this with 2nd graders this past year. We were doing it was career day actually in 2nd grade, and they asked me to come in as like what you can do with technology, and I told them one of my jobs is to evaluate new technology and to see if there's a classroom application for it. So I gave them 3 different AI experiments. We did Quick Draw, we did Scroobly, and we did a piano one, and I let them just play. No directions, no how-tos, no step-by-steps, just play. And after they were done playing with all 3 of these different tech tools, we talked about it. What we liked about it, what was hard to figure out, what they found interesting about it, and then could it be used in the classroom and how. So you were having those conversations, but they had no prior knowledge of how to use these tools. It was just a way for them to kind of think about how they can be used and figuring them out on how they can do it. And I let them use each other. Like if you wanted to work in groups, they could too. Granted, we had to be 6 feet apart, so they had to kind of shout at them a little over each other, but they were able to do that a little bit to be able to have that conversation, which I think is important. Virtual reality field trips would be great here, where you're having them start to think about what they can do. What else should they do with that virtual field trip? I hear that from teachers a lot. Yeah, I could take them on a trip, but what do I do? Well, have them take a screenshot, have them draw on it, throw it into Google Drawing and have them diagram something on it. You can always take it to that next level beyond just looking at something, moving from consumption to creation. Questions on that? All right, so digital citizenship has 2 strands, and I put them both on the same page here because they kind of cover each other. So at the first one, the DL6, we're looking at information, what you should share online. And as we're moving into DL7, we're looking at internet safety, as a full umbrella. These are the last 2 ones, nothing that we haven't kind of hit already as we're going through. So these shouldn't be a heavy load for your teachers or for you if it is in your classroom. So you can kind of get through those. So as we're looking at digital citizenship, the Wayback Machine is a great one to go back and talk about what the internet used to be like. Talking about the tech they use in school versus the tech they use at home. I was doing digital citizenship with 2nd graders, different year. And what I had them do is type into Answer Garden all of the places that they play that has social media, anything they have to use a username or a password or even a code name. I have them type it in, like Roblox, Minecraft, all the different things that these kids play. And we filled the screen. The Answer Garden was jam-packed with all of the places that they share their information. And I shared it with parents. I had a parent night about digital citizenship. And I said, here's what it was 3rd grade, it wasn't 10th grade, because they had to be able to type. Here's all the places your 3rd grader is already giving away information. So we should be having these conversations about what it means to be a good digital citizen at a very young age. It was a little shocking to some of the parents to see that, but I think it was an important image to show that here's the information I gathered right from your own kids. This poster that you see is an ISTE poster. I have it actually hanging in my hallway in my office here, just around the corner, because I love it. And it talks about those pillars: being inclusive, being informed, engaged, and balanced, and alert. And then if you add the Digital Institute on top of it, it will say then that I'm a global impactor. So it becomes this house that they should have around these other pillars. All right, so think about what you're doing in the classroom on these 5 pillars. How could you do that? ISTE has already made resources that are fabulous for you. Common Sense Education has tons of resources for you to make sure that you're hitting all of these different categories. Questions on that? Somewhere in this is when cyberbullying does need to be discussed. It's not written in any of the standards, but it needs to be discussed within it because, and maybe it fits in with it being inclusive part of it, but cyberbullying is definitely something that needs to be addressed within these standards. I'm going to share with you, if I can grab this link here, or maybe I have it. Yeah, it's the next one. So this summer, or this spring, I guess it was, I worked with the Digital Institute on creating this. So they had a global cohort. I had about 4 teachers in my region that participated with there were teachers from all over the globe. We did work with a refugee camp in both Kenya and Kuwait. We did some activities with a kindergarten class in Scotland, and we did all sorts of really fun activities. And one of the things that we said we wanted to put together is I wanted to put together this digital citizenship escape room. Anyone who's seen me at NYSED or has come to things locally, I often would do the Digicit Carnival, which we did in person as a PD activity. Some schools within the state took a version of that and created their own to be for students. But the idea was that we wanted students to kind of like be fully immersed in digital citizenship. So I worked with Nicole Kang, who has this program called elementary.com. It's elementary with an I. She actually lives in France, but she went to school in the States at MIT. And so she did the coding side of it. And then we got together with Michael Drezick, his son, Little Drezick, Mary Alice Curran from the Digital Institute, and Deanne Polian, who works with Michael out in Buffalo. And we created this digital escape room. So the idea was to look at those 5 pillars I showed you on that ISTE poster, and then use those pillars to figure out what's the right thing to do in each of these scenarios as they go through the escape room. All right, so here's a resource for you, free to use. You don't have to pay for elementary to use this resource, but this is a fun one to have your students do. You can't do this as a standalone. You've got to teach those pillars first before they do this, so they understand what they are, and that will make the escape room a lot easier for them. You wouldn't start with this because kids would get pretty frustrated pretty much off the bat. But this is a fun way to kind of talk about what it means to be a good digital citizen. All right, I'm throwing it back at you. Same idea with this Padlet that I separated it out by the resources that the state gave us as far as ideas. Let me put it in the chat. If you have one you'd like to add or a resource you'd like to add, please do so. I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. Any questions? None? Yeah, go ahead and share the Padlets. Absolutely. Somebody asked about sharing them. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna kind of end with you on is something that is, I'm gonna call a work in progress. This is so not done, but this is what I've been working on this summer, and I'm gonna kind of walk you through it a little bit. But this is an activity book. And this is where I said, if you have suggestions, I'm very open to them because I'm definitely not loving this yet. And if I have to trash it and start over, I will do so. But what I was trying to do, and obviously I'm not going to put page numbers because this can grow, but I have to update the index. But what the idea of it is that I would break down each of the subcategories, just explain what they were. And then we get into activity ideas. So still have the identifier and the actual standard, the clarifying statement, and the stated examples. And then after each one, I'm starting to put activities. All right. So obviously there's a lot of ones that don't have activities yet, but like here's one for modeling and simulation. Here's a fun one you could do with Lego education. Here's another one you could do with computer science without a computer from CS Unplugged, Scratch Junior from MIT. So the idea is to create this book that will have resources that fit. Like this, I love this one, Adapt a Pattern Story. We're using an Eric Carle book to talk about patterns. So the idea here is that I'd like each of these areas to have something. So right now I don't have anything for CT5, but for CT6, when I go to the next page, I have some different ideas. Not all of them are going to be free, but I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about giving ideas as far as what teachers could do, and then they can figure out how they want to modify it based on what they do have in their classroom. What are your thoughts, like initially as you're looking through this book? Yeah, I like the visuals. I think that helps. Yeah, teachers need to explore. So originally I had this broken down by strand, so or by concept area. But then I realized that a second grade teacher does not care at all what the fourth grade teacher is doing. So yeah, the index should have links to the pages, and I need to have a link to go back to the main page. And those of you who are book creator users, I would love to be able to immediately add something to all pages. And I don't think that is an option. If there is one, tell me how to do it. But I want to have the index with links to the pages to help people out. But my thought is when you do training with teachers, they can look at this and say, all right, here's my ideas on this strand, or I'm trying to find one that has one again. Like I said, I have a lot of work to do. This is right at the beginning. So now I'm getting into second grade. So here they read this, this one here, identify and analyze how computing technology has changed the way people live and work. Here is a resource, free from Common Sense. They can watch the video, they can link to the resource, and then we can talk about what else they already do that fits in there. And then maybe we can add them on the Padlet to then be added to the book, is kind of my hope. Fingers crossed. I thought about the mini books. Kristen, can you expand what you think about that as far as like how you think that could be done?
Well, I think with Book Creator, can't you share a whole library as public? So you could create like a shelf of books and you could have the main one like you have right there, but then you could have kind of the chunked versions so that a teacher who's just a kindergarten teacher could click on the one that's most relevant and they won't have to look through everything else to
like that.
filter out what they don't want to see.
And that should be an easy copy and paste for me to then make a kindergarten book to say, here's your
yeah, because
K1.
I think you can duplicate the book and then take out what you don't want, or just take
Yeah.
the pages maybe. Either way, I'm not sure if it works both ways, but at least one of those ways would work.
I love that. I hadn't thought about, I do have a bookshelf for it, so that makes sense. I can make these mini books. Have this be the main all over book and then have the others. The other thing I added in is I don't want teachers to just look at their grade level, because sometimes even though you teach third grade, there might be a second grade lesson that works really well, or a first grade lesson rather that works really well.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to be able to take a look at the other ones, especially as we get in the upper grades, because when you look at maybe not the 4, 6, but the 7, 8, 9, 12, there's a lot of overlap that you can definitely do within these standards.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe not by each grade level, but by those like, I don't know, like K1, 2, 3, or K2, however you would break it down. And then even inside the larger book, you could probably link out to those smaller resources if they wanted to. But I think it looks great.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of having it linked back to it, saying if you just want to look at this grade band, here's a great place you can do that.
Yeah, and as long as the index will jump them around and you have like maybe other links within there so that you can quickly navigate to the parts that you want, you might not even need them in ebook, but just a thought.
Yeah, because I mean, when I go back into edit mode on this book, I have it just visual here, but on the edit mode, there's like, I don't know, I have like 150 pages already of this book, and I'm thinking, how are you going to navigate that? That's too cumbersome. Even if you're just looking at, like, if I wanted to go from fourth grade right now, because I don't have anything set, nothing linked, I'm going to be clicking forever till I get to fourth grade, right? So I want to make sure that this is something that's easy to use. But the idea of mini books might be better because it'll get me to where I need to go faster.
Yeah, and if you don't have a limit on how many, you could even have a mini book by standard. You know, you could do it both ways, by grade level and by standard.
True. Yeah, I like that. Then it's a whole, you know, library.
Yeah, it's a
of
little
however
library.
You want to look
It'd be
at
cute.
It.
Fill up a couple
That would be
bookshelves.
I like it. And this is the work that my ed tech, I started it because that's, you know, it's summer, but the ed tech coaches group, this is what I'm hoping they'll want to take on and start to build with me over the course of this school year. Because I know I got a question on how long till it's available. You are welcome to share the unfinished book. You have access to it right now. You know, it's public, and as I'm adding to it, you can certainly see it. I don't think this is ever something that's going to be ever fully done, because I think we'll always have new ideas that we want to add to it. But at least if you want to finish product before you look at it, give me the school year to kind of get it done, because I think it's going to take me that long to organize it and you know, on top of everything else, to get it all ready to go. Any questions on anything we covered today? Thank you. I'm glad you like the book. I really, at first I was like, do I make a website, you know, that has all of the links and moves it all around? But I like books. I was an English teacher. I like books. I like to be able to have something that I can look at pages and think about. You know, I almost wish I'd left room in the margins for ideas, you know, but it's not a writing on books, so it's not that kind of thing. So, so those are my thoughts, but you have access to it as we go through. Let me stop sharing, come back to you guys and ask you, because we're kind of at the end. I've gone through the Nearpod. I did put the link in the chat if you wanted the student paced version of that Nearpod, so you have access to all the links still. That's available for you in the chat if you need me to relink it. I gotta find it again, but I know it's in there. Yeah, student paste. Let me grab it. I'll throw it back in the chat. And then if you are interested in diving deeper, really, we were very much the same flow just over the course of 2 days for the Train the Trainer. We spend time actually doing the placemat activities. I have a few other activities that we do with like Blooms, and we do a little more with the vocabulary. So there's more to it. This is a big introduction, large day kind of thing as we're going through. Any other questions for me? All right. Well, then I'm going to set you free. You can enjoy the rest of your day. How about that?
No questions, but thank you.
Sure. Absolutely. It's good to see you, Julie. I hope this helps with your dissertation.
The whole time. It does, and I will be back.
Oh, good.
Bye, everyone.
I'll stop there. Bye-bye.